call the meeting to order. Our first item is number 2, adoption of agenda and AB 361 finding. I think so.
So this is the same AB 361 findings in order to allow us to use our partially telephonic, partially in-person meeting system. This is mainly for the benefit of the PAC and the TAC, as you guys basically are meeting in person anyway. Are you guys meeting in person too, the PAC and TAC? Oh, all right. Well, I guess it's belt and suspenders then in case we have a problem, so.
Perfect. Thanks, Keith. Okay, is there any comment from the public on item number 2? Seeing none, any comments from the board? None. If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Thank you.
Chairman Peters,
Aye?
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is public comment on the closed session agendas. Are there any members of the public wanting to speak to the closed session? Okay, seeing none, we will adjourn to closed session. Now reconvene to open session, and we'll begin with a report on actions taken in closed session.
Yes, and I will shock everybody by actually having a report out of closed session. First off, I'll talk about what I don't have a report for. So the board met to discuss existing litigation, both the Inyo Kern litigation and the other cases identified on the agenda, and there is no report regarding, no reportable action regarding those items. However, with regard to real property negotiations, and I'm very pleased to report that the GA has reached an agreement. I should say I've been instructed by the board to report that the GA has reached an agreement regarding price for 753 acre feet of, do I have that number correct, Steve Johnson? 753 acre feet of groundwater entitlement, Table A entitlement, sorry.
Correct. Correct.
We will be issuing a letter of intent with that price information and other details, and we will be bringing back a contract in public to be approved by the board in August. So this is an important milestone, and I'm very happy to report it. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report.
Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. Okay, next, I would like to ask you to all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And last for item 5, could we please call the roll?
Chairman Peters,
Here?
Vice Chair Hayman,
Present.
Director Itnire,
Here.
Director Vallejo,
Present.
Director Rotora.
Here.
Okay, and we'll move on to number 6, which is public comment. This time is reserved for members of the public to address the board on any matters not on this agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Is there anyone that would like to speak under public comment?
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Regina Troglin. Some of you guys know me, some of you don't. It got brought up on Facebook yet again for about the millionth time over the last 4 years. If you guys could please move these meetings to the evening so that more community members can participate. A number within our community have to work, during these times, and unfortunately, they cannot participate in a meaningful manner when these meetings are so early in the day. So that, just under advisement, if you guys could look at that and move it backwards.
Thank you. Okay, any other comment from members of the public? Okay, seeing none in the room, nothing on the phones. Okay, we'll now go to board member comments. Any comments from members of the board? I'll just go through Director Rotora.
Yes, I have one comment. I requested at the last board meeting and probably the meeting before that the GA do some planning on multiple projects, including the GSP update, interconnection project, and the annual report. I see no planning information in today's packet. We are spending millions of taxpayer dollars. We're responsible to the public in terms of how we spend that money. I once again request the GA to do some fundamental planning to include schedule and budget, and I believe this is entirely consistent with some of the recent recommendations that have come from the PAC. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, Director Hayman, any comments?
No comments.
Okay, Director Itnire.
No comment.
Okay, Director Vallejo.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is number 8, the consent agenda. And that is item 8A, approval of minutes of June 8th board meeting. Item 8B, resolution 04-22, appointing Emma Lynch as the Bureau of Land Management TAC representative. And 8C, approve expenditures 1 through 6. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak regarding the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, any comments or questions from the board?
I would like to have 8B pulled and 8C6 pulled.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, any other comments from the board? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion on, Mr. Rotora, is that a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of those two items?
8B and 8C6.
Right. So is that a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
Aye. Director
Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll take item 8B first. And Mr. Rotora, the floor is yours.
I'm actually fine with the major portion of it. However, there's an Exhibit A that goes along with that item, and it still has Tim Parker listed as being on the TAC. And we've sent a letter in a month or two ago taking him off the TAC, and I think that's been recognized at the last meeting. It just wasn't taken off of this sheet. So I'm fine with the fundamental issue of the young lady here being on the TAC, but want to make sure it's understood that Mr. Parker is not a member of the TAC.
Okay. Is there any response to that? I'm not sure if.
Yeah, when they adopt the resolution, we can just add the addition of the edit of removing Tim Parker from the exhibit.
I'm sorry, what?
When you vote to adopt the resolution or you motion, you can just motion with the edit included, that we will remove Tim Parker from the exhibit.
Oh, sure. Okay, I move that we accept the item with Mr. Parker taking off the TAC list.
Okay. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itnire,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Thank you. And next we'll take item 8C6.
Yes, I was looking through the financial statement, and it appears that what is happening is the money is being taken from the replenishment fee account and borrowed, loaned to the extraction account in order to pay back the county. It's not clear how or when that money is going to be repaid to the replenishment fee. Can somebody clarify that?
Okay, do we have?
I can speak to that, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, go ahead, Carol.
So you're absolutely correct, Director Ratora, that we are borrowing from the replenishment fee fund to repay that money. Not unlike what was done with the district. District ended up doing the same thing, but we basically don't have a specific timeline. So I guess the answer to your question is no, we don't specifically know when we're going to repay that, just because our revenues from the extraction fee are not so great that we can recover that very quickly.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you through your microphone, well, and my ears, obviously. But the question really is, how are we going to repay the loan from the replenishment fee to the extraction fee? How and when is that going to happen?
And so we don't have a specific time frame for that to occur.
Okay, by the way, I could hear you well that time. Okay, we do. So we don't have a time frame for when that's going to happen, or how?
No, we do maintain it in our accounting, though, that it's an existing loan from, or a transfer from, not a transfer. It's a loan from one fund to the other, and we will be making sure that that's reconciled at some point.
Okay, I guess I guess I can go along with that for now, but I guess I do have a little bit of heartburn when we borrow money from an enterprise fund that is supposed to be dedicated to a certain thing and going out on a loan is all. So I think I understand what you're doing. I just want to make sure that we're diligent in making sure that that money gets repaid.
I understand, but the understanding when the loan was created with the county was that it would be repaid as soon as possible. And actually, as I mentioned when I first started talking, and perhaps you didn't hear me, this is the same thing happened with the district's funds too. So we actually had to repay that from the replenishment fee, had to put it into the extraction fee, and that's another loan that needs to be repaid, internal.
Yeah. I guess the real issue is making sure that it gets repaid.
Yes, and
I
we
want to make
maintain
sure
that.
that's understood.
Absolutely, and you'll see it in our accounting. We maintain that.
Okay, real good. Thank you. So I'll move we accept the item C.
Okay.
8C6.
Okay, thank you. And just for future reference, we can ask some of these questions under the consent agenda without necessarily pulling them all out, just FYI, just as a procedural matter. But we could take public comment on this, Ms. Decker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Peters, for allowing me to speak. I have a question for the attorney. The replenishment fee was created and approved under a special ordinance whereby the public had an opportunity to respond with Proposition 218. I was at that public hearing. The board assured the public that the replenishment fee money would be collected and used only for that purpose. If the board is going to use the replenishment fee fund as a slush fund, if you will, to cover their other expenses, there won't be the money needed when the time comes to pay for whatever water rights or water or the project itself, the pipeline project. And this is a grave concern to many people. I'm not just speaking for myself. I can tell you I have heard those comments from other people. And as you noticed, I thought about getting up and speaking a little bit earlier. I have a suggestion. My suggestion is that in your board package every month, you put the total amounts that you have to the time that the package is put together, how much money is in the replenishment fund and how much money is in the pumping fund, so that the public knows how much money, and you know how much money you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment?
Regina, again. I actually share Judy's thought on this, although I don't, I haven't been present for a while. She's not wrong. That 218 notice was specifically to use that money for importation costs. It was not meant to be used for everything else like it has been lately, and it's been brought up over and over again that the 218 notice was very narrow in scope, and yet that scope seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So if clarification could be given to the public at some point as to why a 218 notice can just randomly change over the years, I think that would be very helpful moving forward so that individuals understand why it is that you guys can now change all these years later without doing another 218 notice to add these components in for the usage of those funds. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I address that real quick?
Sure.
'Cause I heard there was, Mrs. Decker asked for a comment from the attorney. I wasn't sure exactly what the attorney question is, but I'm hearing concern about the possibility that we're changing the 218 notice or changing the purpose of the use of the money. And I just want to make it clear that's not what's happening here. This is a loan and it will be repaid.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none in the room, we'll go to the phones. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Mike Neal. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I'd just like to comment on what's been just brought up here about this loan from the replenishment fee to cover other costs that are not replenishment fee costs. Past year's experience with a similar situation with the city and the wastewater fund and misuse of monies out of that fund can answer the question that the two ladies who have come up have posed. And the answer is that it probably won't get repaid. When they say, well, we're making a loan, but they don't set up anything at all about, okay, here's how we're going to pay it back. Here's what we're going to do. It just promises. Oh yeah, don't worry. We'll put it down somewhere and we'll bury it in budgetary numbers, and then we'll pay it back. Yeah, just trust us. Well, here's what makes it get repaid, and it's the only thing that made it get repaid when the city's manager years ago stole funds out of the wastewater treatment fund, is that you have to be threatened to go to court or actually go to court, and that's the only thing that is going to make it work. And so people have to either get support from some organization that has the means, or they have to some rich person is going to have to pay a lawyer and go to court and make them do it. Make them do what they should do or keep them from doing what they are doing right now, which is just take money from the replenishment fee for purposes that are not replenishment fee purposes. So that's how it's going to work, and trusting the GSA to pay that back and make sure that they take care of the matter and get it done. In my opinion, from my past experience, is just a pipe dream. So they've taken the money out of the replenishment fee, and you're probably most likely never going to see it come back. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other callers on the phones? Okay, seeing none. Just to clarify, Carol, you said that this is going to be repaid out of the extraction fee?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Ratora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is item number 9, board review and potential adoption of agreement with Brown Armstrong to conduct the 2021 financial audit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in your packet a proposal from Brown Armstrong, who conducted our previous audit, as well as I think the one before that. They have proposed the same amount to perform the audit for 2021 as for the 2020 audit. We think that this would be a good idea to go ahead and have Brown Armstrong perform the 2021 audit. They did a lot of work with us and have a lot of information in terms of how we've put together all of the financial data for the past few years. So for at least 2021 audit, staff recommends that you consider accepting the proposal and authorize the general manager to sign and accept the proposal. By the way, the amount that they've proposed, $12,000, was the same amount as they proposed for the 2020 audit, so there's no increase there.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on this from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask if there's a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a
Second.
Great.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Itmeyer,
Aye.
Director Ratora,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 10 is board discussion and possible action regarding private placement funding for the cost of purchasing water entitlements.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe we have Roy Nelson from Wolf Hansen available to give us some details here. Basically, we're talking about working with Wolf Hansen to help us with financing the upcoming water rights purchase. Roy is available to provide some details on the brief staff report we have in the packet. And this is just for information, by the way, but he's going to give you a little bit of background on what they're going to be doing. Roy?
Thanks, Carol. And I'm sorry I'm not there in person this time at a conflict that prevented me to be there. But I also want to point out on the attending the meeting is Ben Levine and Rob Pankratz from Wolf Hansen, along with Michael Garcia from Oppenheimer. As you know, over the months, we've been working with staff and at least looking at potential options for financing water purchases by the Groundwater Authority. With the pending potential water purchase, as you may remember, there's two methodologies that can be used. One is a private placement structure, which allows Oppenheimer to go out and talk to banks and investors more on an individual basis, or a full public offering where a prospectus is prepared and it is put out on a certain date to the public, and there are orders taken for the bonds and eventually an interest rate set and a financing progresses to closing. we think, given the timing and the size involved in the first tranche of the water rights purchase, that private placement is probably the way to start. And in a couple of minutes, I'll turn it over to Michael to sort of walk through what the steps and process is that they go through there. But our goal here is to achieve a financing proposal for you in a time frame that will allow you to meet your obligations under any water rights purchase. So, Michael, why don't you go ahead and sort of walk them through what the process is from now through coming back to them with a somewhat firm proposal.
Great, thanks, Roy. And just to kind of give you guys an overview of the process and the goal, the whole purpose of going through a lender request for proposal is to get the best financing terms and the lowest interest rate possible for the authority. And so that process entails gathering information from the authority, creating a package and soliciting it to investors. This process typically takes about 2 to 3 weeks. During that process, we will have conversations and discussions with investors, fielding questions. They may ask for more information, in which case we could relay that to the authority. At which point, after this 2 to 3 week process, we will collect all of the proposals and summarize them and have a call with the authority and their municipal advisor, Wolf Hansen, and we'll discuss and go through each of them to see which one provides the best terms and lowest interest rates possible. But this timing kind of all depends on when we have the information we need before we can go out to the investors. Another option also at the end of that process, we can compare it to a public offering just to make sure we're getting the best results for the authority. Although, based on my recent experience with these types of financings and this power amount, it's very likely that the private placement will work best.
Okay.
Roy or Bud, is there anything else you'd like to add to that process?
Bud, you're on mute.
We can't hear you, sir.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now.
There we go.
The only thing I'd like to point out is that in the process, when we get the results on the private placement, as Michael pointed out, it will be compared to the public market. But we would also take into consideration the timing requirements that the authority has for performing, and the public offering generally will take longer. You have to prepare the public document that is used. The process takes longer before you actually come to a date where you can set the interest rate. Where in the private placement, you're going to be setting the interest rate when the proposals are received from the private lenders and the decision is made to negotiate with one. You get in most cases, you get the interest rate set. With the volatile market we have right now, and it's a very crazy market, the rates are moving around very, very quickly. The ability to have a proposal and to be locked in that rate before they change is a very big positive. So I would suggest that, as Michael has said, most likely the private placement is going to be the structure that we're going to pursue.
And just to dovetail on what Bud said is obviously our goal is to try and get this moving along to bring back to you at your next meeting. However, much of that timing is dependent on how quickly we receive from the authority and staff the information that Michael has requested to put the package together with the bank. As he said, he needs about a 2-3 week lead time to put this together and get out there and talk to them. So we're certainly ready to move forward as time efficiently as we can and continue to work closely with staff and consultants to get that done.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Hanson and your team. Are there any questions from the board?
More of a clarification for myself. So the interest rates, have they gone up since we initiated this in your first presentation?
Let me take
Yes, go ahead, Bud.
I was just going to say, I've been doing this for 50 years, so I've lived through all of the various vagaries of the interest rate moves, dating all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s, when we had this very, very high inflation. To answer your question, 3 weeks ago, the 10-year Treasury was at a 350. Today, it's at a 293. That's a move in 2 weeks that we used to see over a 2-year period. So interest rates have gone up. However, they went up to that high that I just mentioned, and they've come back down, and they hopefully will be settling in a much narrower trading range that it's been. So I think we're at a point where the rates should stay, although they're higher than they were, they should stay fairly stable and be accommodative for the kind of financing that you're going to need.
And they've probably, Bud, would you agree? They're probably, from when we started this towards the end of last year to now, they're probably up a 1.5%, 2% across the board.
At least, yeah, 150, 200 basis points. Yeah, we were consistently seeing interest rates for the 10-year at around 150, and here they are at over 3. So now down a little bit below that. So yes, that's been the big move from that point.
And in regards to the private versus public sector, is there a chance of getting a lower interest rate going through the private, or do they tend to stay the same whether you go private or public?
Given the Groundwater Authority's lack of going out in the market before, and this being the first time, and the uniqueness of the replenishment fee and everything, it is really a financing combined with the smaller size of this initial one that lends itself to a private placement where you can tell the story on a more personal basis to potential investors, answer any questions they might have that are targeted to specific investors or banks. And the interest rate difference in this situation would probably be de minimis.
Right. And
Roy, if I
go ahead.
If I could just add something really quickly to that. We've also found in the private placement market, the interest rates are much more stable. The public market can be quite volatile week to week, depending on the latest, news and CPI reports and economic data. But the private placement market we've seen, even with the swing in rates over the past month or two, has somewhat stabilized.
And to add on to that, the answer will be you notice we're doing this two-pronged approach where Oppenheimer is going to go out and get the private placement proposals. Then it's going to be compared to what comparable public issues are being priced at in the marketplace, keeping in mind that the private placements will be more volatile, but there would be a good comparison to make so that when the board is making its decision, it will have the information of what private placements are at this time and the likelihood of locking in a particular rate and what the public market is. So you'll be well assured that the road that we take is going to be the one that will be in the best interest of the authority.
Okay, I think that answers my question, because my concern was whether we looked into the public side, but I see the benefit of moving on the private side and locking in that rate in today's volatile interest rate market.
Yeah, it's also to be noted that under a private placement, with the water right purchase that is being contemplated, there is a agreement to purchase, but then there is a series of approvals that need to be done either environmentally or on a regulatory basis. A private placement allows you to actually potentially get a commitment from a bank that is then indexed to something that will allow it to be actually closed once the interest rate finalized, once all the approvals have been prepared, where under a public offering, you probably have to wait through that entire process before you can go out and start trying to market the securities.
Very good. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heyman. Any other questions from the board? Director Itmeyer, Director Vallejo?
Director Itmeyer just emailed me that he had to leave the meeting for jury duty.
Oh,
So he will
got
no
it.
longer be attending.
Thank you.
Nothing for me.
Okay, well, seeing no other comments from the board, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none. April, could you clarify? I don't believe this is an action item, is it?
No,
Okay,
no action at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, thank you again to Mr. Hanson and your team for your work on that.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Our next item is Resolution 05-22 requiring new well permit application approval through IWVGA per Executive Order number 07-22.
We're going to have our attorney cover this one.
Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to do so. Members of the board, so this concerns an executive order that was signed by the governor a few months ago that directs that certain additional action be taken for approval by the county of certain wells. I just want to make it clear at the front side and remind everybody that this has pretty limited application in this particular valley. There's, as you know, the GSP that we adopted does not put any limitation on new wells. The concept is that you pay a replenishment fee potentially for that or not, depending on the nature of the pumping. But we don't have a limitation on new wells. The GSP also doesn't have any finding regarding subsidence or any finding that any particular well is causing subsidence. So what this is before the county can issue a permit for wells that are not public water system wells, that's excluded from this, and wells that are not small domestic wells, that's also excluded. So you're talking commercial wells, essentially. The county has to then inquire from the GA about two things. One, is the well going to cause subsidence? And two, is the well going to cause a pumping depression? So we've already talked about subsidence. So we don't currently have any information that any wells are causing subsidence. I don't believe we've got any reason to believe that any new wells will cause subsidence. So that one will be checked no. And then the second question is it cause a pumping depression? The county itself maintains standards for that determination. Presumably the GA would simply use the county's own standards that the county would have done anyway if it had been sent directly to the county, and we would respond presumably no to that question, and then it would be turned over for the county to make a decision. Some people have asked, should there be an appeals process to this, or is this going to be, some conspiracy-minded folks have said, is this going to be somehow a way that the GA would stop the water district from putting in new wells? Again, just to make it clear, this does not apply to public water systems, but even if it did apply to public water systems, the GA is going to be answering no probably to all of those questions. I don't know, there may be existing water district wells that are causing pumping depressions under the county standards. I don't know the answer to that, but in any case, this is not meant to apply to the water district's wells anyway. So with that, I hope that report was clear enough. With that, we would recommend approval of the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. Are there any questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a question. You're talking about the appeal. How do appeals currently take place, and how does this change any ability for someone to make an appeal?
So in my view, if there's any appeal of the decision, that would follow the county rules, whatever they are. The county's the one issuing the permit. So I guess I see Mr. Christensen's coming up. He can explain whatever the county process is, but I think it's a ministerial process, and therefore there's probably not an appeal.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, that's correct. There is no appeal because it is ministerial. Before Sigma, you would come in and as long as you met the requirements, it's sort of like a building permit. It is like a building permit. As long as you met the requirements of the permitting agency, you would get the well permit. And now after that, the only thing that's going to happen from our perspective is, from the county's perspective, is that we would get some kind of verification, communication, a letter or an email on any well applicant, just confirming that the GSA is okay with that, in the sense that, we're not developing a new well that is going to violate your whatever allocation plans and regulatory limitations you have on that. But if you're paying the fee, in essence, you would be okay from the GSA's perspective, and that would come to the county, and we would go through the normal permit process, and you would get your well. So hope maybe that clarifies. But by the way, we're doing this same, just to kind of reiterate with what Mr. Lemieux said, we deal with at least 7 GSAs where we're doing this same process with them. We're working out a communication process, which the executive order from the governor is requiring us to do, is to have that communication, because the governor's office wants Sigma to be protected, and the principles of Sigma to actually affect the GSAs and not let wells slip through that would violate the sustainability goals of Sigma. So anyway, I'd be happy to answer any other questions if you have them.
Great. Thanks.
I guess I am confused. What is the purpose of the governor's ordinance or whatever it is? And it sounds like you're saying that it's not going to have any effect under any conditions at all. And so I'm wondering, why do we have it? And is there any need for it, or what's the purpose? It's just not clear.
What's the purpose for having the what in particular?
Under what conditions could somebody be turned down?
Mr. Rotora, the executive order was meant to apply throughout the whole state. And in some basins, there might be problems with subsidence, and there could be cone of depression problems. I think in the Central Valley, there's a lot of problems with subsidence and cone of depression problems. So this particular executive order may have more application there. It's just in this particular base, with our geological features, we have fortunately not had problems with subsidence yet. And we as a board, you as a board, I should say, have made the decision to set up a regime to allow people to put in new wells. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So as I say, this should not have much application, if any, here.
Correct. In another county, again, this doesn't apply to Indian Wells Valley. The GSA may be very aware of the Kern County Kern Groundwater Authority may be very concerned about subsidence, and they see a new well in a particular location, or any new well, they might say, we have a problem with this well because of subsidence. Subsidence is one of those undesirable results that Sigma is supposed to test for. And so they could say, yeah, we wouldn't be okay with this well because of subsidence problems. Again, that's an example of something that could happen elsewhere. It's likely not going to happen here because of what your attorney just shared with you. You don't restrict wells. You don't new wells. You're allowing people to pump as long as they pay the fee. Then it's going to be very perfunctory, and if a new well were to come in, we would expect something from this GSA, and then go through the normal well permit process. Why it's being done? Because the governor said it needed to be done. If that's a clear enough. He wants the governor and the state want every GSA to review those to make sure that one of those undesirable results is not being negatively impacted. And so we all have to jump through this hoop.
Okay. So, and bottom line though, you do not anticipate any wells not being approved. Is that a correct statement?
That's well, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say so. If there's not a well approved, it might be for other reasons, like the party's not paying does not agree to pay a replenishment fee for their pumping, for example. But that would be a separate question. It wouldn't be related to this particular process.
And remember, there's still a process in place to get your well permit from the county, and if a applicant didn't meet the permit requirements. We got to have wells that have X, Y, Z, and they need to be back away from certain things. But that exists today. So I wanted to make sure we were clear that a well permit still could be denied until it met those criteria, regardless of what was happening with the GSA. But with the GSA, yes, I would agree that in the near term, there's no need. We wouldn't see any denial of a permit, but you can never guarantee 100% because circumstances are unique sometimes.
And assuming there ever was one, is there a chance to appeal it at the county level?
No, because we wouldn't appeal it. They'd come back to this body because we wouldn't. It would not. We would wait until the GSA worked it out. The county has no business deciding groundwater management activities. We don't. You have that responsibility now. So if they weren't paying their fee, which right now is the only scenario.
I don't want to talk about the fees. It's the other issues I'm concerned about is the subsidence and the lowering of the water level.
Again, that's your responsibility. It's not the county's.
Yeah, Mr. Ritor, if we were going to deny on the basis of subsidence, then our technical analysis would need to be updated. So this would be something that would happen presumably after a revision of the GSP because we discovered evidence of subsidence. So that's currently, there's nothing to say about subsidence. We don't have that analysis. The other piece of it, the pumping depression, that's just the existing county standard. It basically changes nothing. The standard already is in place. That's the basis for denying or not the permit currently by the county, and we would just be essentially doing that.
So basically, the default for the staff, if we pass this, is no and no.
Correct. Provided that on that second no, provided that it meets the existing standards for well interference.
Existing standards for what?
Well interference, the pumping depression. That's the second question. So there is currently in place before you can get a well from the county, there's a requirement that it doesn't interfere with somebody else's well. That's the same standard that would apply. The only difference is that it's the GA checking the box and then giving it back to the county and then the county checking their box.
If you have a number of wells in an area and you add one more, is there a quantitative definition for anytime you take more water out than you were taking, you are going to increase that depression somewhat? Maybe almost not measurable, but is there a quantitative?
I don't have the standard for well interference in front of me from the county, but it's well interference. It's not contributing to an overall. I'm looking at Phil here. Yeah. Phil, do you know the standard offhand? It's interfering with somebody's well, not contributing to an overall pumping depression, right?
Yeah. So forget about the depression. Depressions happen, but really it's setbacks. How much distance of a setback do you have from one well to the other? Aside from that, there's cones of depression, but cones of depressions fill in. So, you might have an area that has a little bit more of a drop than an area 3 miles down the road because of a cone of depression, but that always at some point in time equals out. So the cone of depression is just that, it's a cone. The well interference is going to be, is this well within a setback enough that's going to damage a well next to it? And there's setbacks that are required from the county standards as part of Port Cologne that's been around since 1981, which is what all
Can
the
you
well
talk a
permitting
little
is.
closer to the phone, Mike?
Sure. So this is all going back to 1981's Port Cologne, which is well standards, and it's a building permit. I mean, the best way of looking at it is this house being built with 2x4s 16-inch on centers, or is it 2x6s 20-inch on centers? If you check those boxes yes, you get your building permit. That's what well permitting is, and it's about distances. Now, aside from that, we understand there's some cones of depression problems out here. We've heard a lot of comment that the water district has wells that are creating a cone of depression, which are causing some problems. But those problems are going to be alleviated once we bring imported water in and we do the other steps that we're doing here. That is sort of the key feature of this GSP. And it's one of the reasons why this has little to any effect on this GSA, because we have an adopted GSP. We have a program that will achieve sustainability. We're 8 of, depending on how you want to calculate it, somewhere from low 30s to high mid 40s of GSAs in the state that have adopted GSPs. So we're out there on the leading edge. Have actually got something that's doing something. And our whole GSP is predicated on the fact that you can have wells in this basin, you can grow pistachios in this basin if you want, and you can even put new pistachios in if you pay for the water you need through the import supply, which is going to be the replenishment fee. So our bottom line default in this basin is you get a well. And this order was required by it's executive order required by the governor. There's going to, in the process legislation, which will fairly well mimic this, and it's going to be the same thing, is this well going to affect your GSP negatively? That's really what this is getting down to. And there are going to be no wells in this basin that I can think of in any way, shape, or form that are going to negatively impact our GSP. Because we are predicated on the fact that we wanted people to be able to have wells in this basin, and that was the underlying purpose of our GSP, is to allow this community to continue growing. So that's the first part of it. And I think that pretty much sums it up. Now you're asking about appeal. If we find the 1 in a million well that Steve can't check the boxes on, we'll bring it to the board and discuss it. But you should understand, if we ever do that, that's going to cause CEQA, because then it becomes a discretionary act. It's no longer ministerial check the box, and that well is so far out of the norm of a normal well permitting that I can't even think of what it would be. But it's going to be a very complicated well, because once this board starts talking about it, it becomes a discretionary action. It becomes CEQA. At that point, I'm almost assured it'll be a full EIR, because that well is so far out of norm that I couldn't even imagine a negative deck or an exemption applying to it. And you're talking a $500,000 process just for the EIR for that well. So I don't know what well that would be. I doubt it possibly exists. It's probably a 1 in 100 million well. But this doesn't really affect our GSP. This is very much check the box and move on.
Okay, thank you. It's my understanding that this resolution turns the authority over to the general manager. Is that correct? And the general manager will then take it and run with it, and assuming is either going to make a decision on her own or delegate it to someone else. Is that correct?
Yeah, it turns it over to staff, correct.
Pardon?
Yes.
Okay, so who, if she doesn't do it herself, who would she be handing it off to?
Presumably the water resources manager.
Okay. I'm assuming Steve's on the line?
You there, Steve?
Yes, I'm on.
There we go.
I'm on.
What is your perspective on the determination of any well permit? Not going through what we've gone through the last 10, 15 minutes, just very briefly, can you summarize what you believe that would be your responsibility?
Sure. First of all, in agreement with everything that Keith and Phil already said, because we've talked about this in the past. So full agreement with all of that. If I was going to add something, Director Vittorio, what I would add is that this is nothing new. And it's nothing new for us. In adjudicated basins, there is a certain responsibility for every groundwater management agency. And I'm not saying that this groundwater, this Sigma, this GSA is going to get out there and regulate wells. But with every groundwater management agency, there's a certain responsibility to try to be aware of and try to avoid conflicts. And if there's going to be a conflict, if there's going to be a well drilled, and it's pretty clear that it may conflict with somebody else's well and cause negative impacts in somebody else's well, then in my view, it's the groundwater authority's responsibility to try to alleviate that conflict before it happens, so that there's not capital funds expended for a project that ends up in court, because that's where it can go. If somebody feels like they've been impacted by somebody drilling a well next door, they can go to court and look for some kind of relief or some kind of action. So as a groundwater management agency, one of the things we would try to do is always solve those problems before they occur. And that would be our job. And if you can't solve it, then yeah, it could still go to a direction where somebody can still file a legal action against somebody drilling a new well. But from our experience, you want to try and alleviate this, and you want to put the effort in, and you want to document trying to alleviate a conflict or a problem. Because if it does go to court, many times the judge will look at the groundwater management agency and immediately ask the groundwater management agency why they didn't try to solve the problem, or what have they done to help solve this before it occurred. So that's our perspective, is we're not looking for problems, we're looking to solve problems.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, are there any other comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to members of the public here in the room, and then we'll go to the phones.
Joshua Nugent, Mojave Pistachios, and appreciate that this is a kind of a confusing topic that was imposed on us by Mother Nature and the governor. So with all that being said, this resolution that recognizes Executive Order N722 as the basis for the resolution, but it doesn't contain an expiration date that's tied to that same executive order. So we just would request that the resolution should be amended to specify that it expires when the authority granted by that executive order expires, so that the resolution doesn't survive beyond the drought in the executive authority. So thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I have some questions. And I hope probably the attorney may be the right one. With this resolution, I know Kern County talked a lot. It seems to only apply to them. Is this also applying to San Bernardino and Inyo County? Since, although I'm not aware if any of the wells are technically on their borders or not, but does this apply to all three or just the one?
It applies to each of the counties. However, I think all of the action is in Kern County.
Okay, yeah. From what I read within how this draft reads, it almost reads like it's only Kern County, so possibly look at that. And then you guys were discussing the fact that this predominantly only applies to commercial wells but would not impact the water district or private wells, correct?
The governor's order excludes those wells.
Okay. Within the document that was sent, that's in the board packet, the way that it reads to a layperson is that this resolution would apply to all new wells. So recommendation based on what I read as a layperson is that new wells entirely would be impacted. Not saying that it does, not saying that that's not the, intent, but the way that it reads on paper for a layperson, that's how it comes off. And then my last question just has to do with possible costs with staff. Is there potentially an estimate of how much this resolution may cost the GA, and which fund would this potentially come out of? So that would just be my last question, which you don't have to get back to me on the last one. You can email me. But thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Keith, let me answer her first question, which is, it only applies to the executive order, and the executive order excludes those wells. Right. So we maybe could have used more words to answer your question.
Speak into the mic, please.
But the answer is the executive order excludes those wells. This only applies to the executive order, and that's why it's not there.
Right, and we don't have the power to extend the executive order.
And as for cost, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of time. This is really designed to be very much a quick check the box. Full disclosure, I worked on the county side creating the form that we're going to be checking the box on, and that was our entire desire, was to make it a quick check the box for every GSA in Kern County. If there is a well drilled in San Bernardino County, they'll have their own well permitting process, and they'll have their own form, which I'm going to guess is going to be close to ours, because it's designed to make it ministerial so we don't get into CEQA. It's designed to be a quick check the box, and in our basin with our GSP, we're permitting wells.
Okay,
so
that answers that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public present would like to speak to this item? And just real quick for clarification, Mr. Lemieux, to Mr. Nugent's point about having a sunset in there, as I read it, section 1F essentially is that. It says, pursuant to the executive order, basically a verification has to be provided to the authority in compliance with that executive order. So once there is no executive order anymore, this is kind of null and void. Is that correct?
Well, that's the whereas clause, so it doesn't, Mr. Nugent's correct that it doesn't have anything that specifically times it out, but then again, there would be no basis to do it without the executive order, so it's kind of belt and suspenders, I guess. You could add one.
Okay.
A provision that says that. It wouldn't do any violence to it if you did. If you don't add it, we're not going to be enforcing an executive order that doesn't exist, so.
Understood.
Your choice.
Appreciate it.
Judy Decker again. I find this discussion quite disturbing. You are a groundwater authority established on the basis that we are in critical overdraft and have been for at least 50 years. And we're talking about permitting new wells, commercial wells, agricultural wells, because the public wells have been excluded. I do not see how you can even think about doing such a thing. Mr. Hall mentioned simply that, okay, you buy 120 acres, you're going to drill a new well, and you're going to pay the replenishment fees. I have a question for staff. We have a replenishment fee. How many of the large agricultural developments in this valley are not paying a replenishment fee, nor have they signed up for the transient pool? What makes you think that a new development, a new well, is going to pay that fee? It is my understanding that at this point in time, the only entity paying that fee are the customers of the water district. And yet the proposal for this future of our valley is to spend millions and millions of dollars on imported water, providing there is water to import. I find this all very, very disturbing, not only from an actual knowledge of the science of this basin, but morally.
Can I speak to that?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Lemieux.
Mrs. Decker is correct that there are no agricultural interests that are currently paying the fee. In fact, the Water District's the only one paying the fee. But I want to make it clear that we are in the process of enforcing the fee against the parties that are not in the transient pool and are failing to pay the fee. So understand that if you're failing to pay the fee, then we are seeking an order from the court that we expect to get soon that will order that those parties to no longer pump because they're clearly harming the basin, they're causing wells to go dry. All of those things that you've identified are correct. Having said that, the logic of the fee is that you're replacing the water you're pumping. So in the event, it's certainly possible for those parties to get, to correct the problem by paying the fee so that we can import the water and fix the problem. But, so that's what it comes down to. When there's talk about people not getting well permits, it's not going to be for any of the reasons. If they don't get a well permit, it's not going to be for any reason that's identified in this executive order. It's going to be because they're out of compliance with our fee system, and those same parties are also going to have their existing wells shut off for the same reason.
Thank you, Mr. Lemieux. Can we have our next speaker, please?
Sophia Merck. Executive orders from this body should be clearly stated before this group votes on it. And it should be circulated to the public, not with addendums after the fact, not with wordsmithing from an attorney. We need to have it in front of us. So I'm asking for you not to vote on this executive order right now until it is clearly stated and defined what private wells are going to be excluded, what private wells are going to be involved, what commercial wells will be involved in this. I really think you owe that to the residents of this community that pay taxes, to the supervisors of Kern County, the city, and all these other places. You really need to define an executive order before you vote on it. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am, I think there might be a misunderstanding here. This isn't an executive order coming from this body. This is an executive order that was issued by the governor.
I know.
Okay.
I know, but
Okay.
if you're gonna change it, you need to clearly define it in this body.
So just for clarity, we're not changing the executive order. What we're doing today is adopting a resolution. The resolution is in writing, and it's attached to the agenda packet for your review. It has been when the agenda was posted.
I know, and that's another problem. The agenda items don't usually come up within this 72-hour time frame that it's supposed to come up under the Brown Act. Thank you.
The Brown Act requires us to post the agenda in 72 hours. The agenda packet has to be made available to the public at the same time it's made available to the board, and those are the rules that we follow.
I'm not here to debate that issue. I just wish that you would clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to eliminate any appearance that we're doing something incorrectly, because what we're doing is correct under the Brown Act, ma'am.
Next speaker, please.
I'm Don Decker, one of the last few remaining TAC members. I have a couple of comments that relate to the notion that a given well might be actually acceptable if, for example, the replenishment fee were to be paid, which would presumably then buy a certain quantity of imported water. In an overall water balance sense, that's absolutely correct. However, the aquifer that we're drawing from here is not of very high transmissibility, because the clay content that is almost universally present over the basin slows water flow down. So a relatively high production well will have a local impact, and it most certainly will impact any wells that are within, some distance, half a mile to mile and more. The overall basin is declining. That's why we're declared in critical overdraft, but the local effects are even stronger. And so the idea that the imported water, which will be used in ways that are not yet defined, presumably the water district would have a major part of that imported water directly, since it's likely to be treated water, potable water, means that the more remote locations, North Brown Road, for example, is in a sense on its own. That is, what happens, and the imported water certainly repairs an overall balance, which is an essential factor, but the local effects are being substantially ignored. I don't want to throw another ugly aspect into this whole thing, but actually there has been significant subsidence in this basin previously that's been largely ignored. And it is in the area of the old Bowman Ranch, which is where the new Walmart is. And the magnitude of the subsidence was on the order of 6 feet. And in fact, if you look at the terrain in the vicinity of the new Walmart, you'll discover that, in fact, there is a noticeable depression. So I don't mean to make a big thing out of that, but there is a subsidence problem here, and it could be a lot worse if we dewatered more clay bearing sediments. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Hello, my name is Penelope Lapome. I had been following some of the water GA stuff years ago, and then I stopped, and I am behind the ball on knowing really what's going on. However, I did write to the supervisors, before they had the rezoning of the agriculture. And at that time, I had stated that I did not think that the county should issue any more well permits, with the possible exception for people who already had wells and needed a new permit to drill deeper or put in a different one because of damage or breakage or things like that. I'm not a well owner, so I don't understand a lot of that. However, until we come into balance, I have some serious reservations about any new wells being drilled at all, and I am very skeptical of imported water. So I hope you'll take those concerns into consideration in your deliberations. I did look at some of the packet, and I saw that they think that the brackish water is not going to be sufficient to meet our needs, and I can understand how that could be. And I believe we've already done a considerable amount of conservation, so I don't know where we're going to have enough water. So thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you. I think we've gone a little bit off the rails. This item isn't about replenishment fees or importing water or anything. This is just about making us compliant with the governor's executive order. So are there any other speakers that would like to discuss this item?
Mr. Lemieux, is there a simple answer to the question of who does the governor's resolution apply to, and who does it not apply to?
The state of California.
Yes, it's stated in the executive order itself.
It is. And is there a simple way of summarizing who is and who is not?
There is.
Can you state that?
Sure. This is my summary. I don't have it open in front of me, but as I recall, it excludes wells for domestic service that are under a defined amount of 2 acre-feet per year, I'm going to say hypothetically, but something like that. And then the second exclusion is for public water systems, which are defined as water systems with, I think, 17 or more connections. And that's it. Everything else, it applies to everything else.
Stan, the form that's provided in the packet only has type of well, irrigation, or industrial marked on it. This is the county's check form that they're planning to use.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like we have one more caller on the phones. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Esposito, and I represent Mojave Pistachios. And I have just a few comments on the proposed resolution based on the conversation that's occurred so far today on this item. And the first is that there has been discussion today over whether there's a process available for appeal or hearing where the GA recommends that the county not approve a well permit. And my first suggestion would be that the resolution should be updated to provide or clarify what appeal or hearing process is available in that situation. My second suggestion relates to today's discussion that's focused around permits for the idea that our discussion today was focused around permits for new wells, and the resolution itself refers to proposed wells. And my suggestion is that the resolution should clarify whether it extends to all well permits issued by Kern County, including permits for well modification of existing wells. And then my third comment is just a note that the county form attached to the board packet does not include a checkbox for subsidence or interference findings, just 2 findings related to consistency with the GSP and interference with the GSA's SGMA authorities. So my question would be whether the intent is that the form be updated or otherwise how the GA would provide input to Kern County regarding the subsidence and interference findings that are incorporated into the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other public comments? Okay. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion or motion.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Okay, I'll make the second. Okay, we got a second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Rotora,
No.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
and Director Itnyer is absent.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to item number 12, the DWR approved groundwater sustainability plan implementation update.
I guess, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Steve Johnson, Water Resources Manager. I guess I'm going to cover this one. I want to make it clear that this PowerPoint is GA staff prepared. So I welcome input from the GA staff if I don't cover something, because it is pretty broad. I sometimes take a little more latitude than I should, and I get away with it. But I wanted to, even before the Water Resources Manager report, which is next, and we'll be on that, I wanted to congratulate the board on the work on imported water table and entitlement. It's a very huge accomplishment, and to get something like that done in a situation that we're in with a lot of different input, a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of static to get through, to get to the answer, to get it done is really a major accomplishment of this board. And again, I congratulate the board because it's a major step on it is the major body of the GSP. So I wanted to mention that. I apologize for not being there. My wife, who I think most of you met some time ago when I brought her to one of the meetings, had back surgery last week. She's getting around, but I didn't think it would be good to be that far away with her just having back surgery and can't get around very much. She actually had a doctor's appointment today that I thought, so I know I could attend, but that got moved till tomorrow. But anyway, she's doing fine. So I apologize for not being there. I wanted to be there. I'm in there in spirit. I'm certainly there in spirit and stuff. Another item that I wanted to mention is Director Vittora did mention something about planning what we're doing on the GSP, on the annual report, and the 5-year update and things like that. We're providing this is going to be a very, very broad look at what we're doing. There's a lot of things going on. We're working on a lot of different things, making a lot of progress and a lot of accomplished, which I'm going to cover here today. What I believe Director Vittora is looking for is more on the order of a schedule and a budget going forward. Your general manager, Carol Thomas-Kiefer, under her general manager report, I think, I'll mention it, but as a reminder that Carol was going to mention it too. We have a budget process coming up in the next few months. The appropriate time to look at something like Mr. Vittora asked for is during the budget process, because we look at work, obviously, and we look at what we're going to get done for the next budget cycle and then schedule it. We could even look at a couple of years if we need to, because we're looking at 2025. Anyway, I don't have schedules. I don't have budgets here. I can tell you straight up, we are looking at schedules. We do have them. We're working on all those schedules. We're working on it all the time. Internally, we have meetings. We have coordination. We are working on schedules. We are working on budgets. We're organizing all of this work, and I'll describe some of that here. To put it into a format with a planning schedule and a budget going through till, I guess, the 5-year update. There's some work involved with that, but we do want to make sure we get it right and that we coordinate it with the budgets that the GA staff, Carol and April, will pull together. So with that. I'll get the PowerPoint up. I will mention that I have on staff for the Water Resource Manager report. I have Jeff is on the line. Jean Moran, you all know Jean Moran. Jean is online. She'll give her report. Jean was going to be there. We've got staff there. Nicole's there doing some well work and some other work, so she's in the field. Jean had a scheduled meeting that got moved. Otherwise, she would have been there at the meeting, sitting in one of the chairs up there, but she's remote today. And then we have Mayra Lopez. She's new for you folks, and we're going to get her indoctrinated. I think Jeff's going to have her give us some of the reports on some of the, in the Water Resource Manager report, some of the grant information. So starting with the PowerPoint, and I'm going to try to see if I can't get the PowerPoint to show up on my, I can't. Make it show up. Somebody has to show me how to do this. No, didn't do it. So anyway, I've got it in front of me. So the first PowerPoint, this is an overview. I mentioned it's a broad overview. staff certainly just step in and mention if you want to comment on any of the items. Very general to begin with. We try to keep this simple. Another confession. First draft of doing this had a lot more detail, and I take long enough to talk anyway. You add more detail, we just take longer. If we have questions, we can add more information to you. Respond. You can provide more information. We try to keep this pretty general, but we do have a lot of this put together in a much more detailed format. So DWR approved GSP implementation update. It's been about 6 months. And so we are giving you an update for this year about what we've been doing and kind of generally where we're at. And the first bullet point, it was approved without any, we call it any immediate or substantive contingencies or corrections. To be clear, we had recommended corrective actions. Those recommended corrective actions were recommended, and the language indicates very clearly that addressing the recommended corrective actions will appropriately will enhance the ability of DWR to again approve our GSP in the 5-year update. The DWR approval did expressly support the scientific methodology and the assumptions using the GSP, specifically called out the work that was done, the modeling, the overdraft, the sustainable yield, specifically called out the work that was done there. When it talks about, when DWR talks about reviewing the GSPs, it was mentioned by Phil Hall a little bit early from Kern County. Your GSP was only one of 8 approved to date, with at least 34 deemed incomplete. And as Phil mentioned, there was upwards of over 40 that were reviewed. But one of 8 on the first round of critical overdraft basins is pretty impressive. There were 7 recommended corrective actions. They did not impact the approval. I will mention that language has been used, which I totally disagree with, and I've tried to maintain my concern with the language being used. But considering these corrective actions as deficiencies, in my view, and DWR, we've talked to DWR. Referring to them as deficiencies is completely inappropriate, and I wish nobody would do that. They are not deficiencies; they're recommended corrective actions, and there's a huge difference. And I would liken the comparison just going forward, and maybe we can get away from this. But going forward, I would liken the comparison to, if your child took a test, a 1 out of 10 test, and they got 8 right, and they got a B on the test, and all you wanted to do was talk about the 2 they missed, doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's not what we're doing here. We're talking about the fact that we've got a passing grade and is one of very few, and we should be focusing on that passing grade and the fact that we have no problem, none at all, with any of those recommended corrective actions. We reviewed them immediately, and we have no problem addressing them. We have no concerns with being able to address those, and we are in the process of doing so. So next slide. Just a little bit of background. This is just a little bit of reminders about the parameters that we're working with. Everybody knows that we've been on overdraft for a long, long time. We pulled out just recently the old Dendy report, which some of you are familiar with up here. Our office actually worked on it back then, and it indicated back then that pumping was on the order of 25,000 plus acre feet and significantly over what they considered might be the sustainable yield, even though they didn't address sustainable yield. But DWR, in the approved GSP, DWR did conclude that basin's natural recharge is not sufficient to support just domestic and Navy needs alone. Not enough there. No agriculture, no cereals, there's not enough there. And the DWR approval certainly expressed that we need to do something right now by approving our projects, and we call it here as purposeful and immediate action needs to be taken. So there's been some discussion earlier about wells going dry. Yeah, we're seeing some things. We're finally getting some information. I'm not sure why we're not being, the GA is not being included in some of this discussion. There's different things that might be going on. But we're getting some information now, and we've gone to the state. There's some places where we go to the state, we can get some information. We'll be providing some of that information likely to you folks through the litigation. I am preparing a declaration that will have some attachments that will include information to date on the known impacted dry wells, replacement wells, or wells that have been abandoned, shallow wells being impacted by the overdraft. That'll be a part of the declaration, and at that point, it will certainly be available. The slide here indicates 1% have been reported dry since we got started on this. Shallow well impact analysis indicates 1 in 10 wells, most of them shallow wells, but 1 in 10 wells will be impacted by 2030. It's happening right now, folks. So I don't think we're far off. And it increases to 1 in 4 by 2040. So I don't think we're far off in these projections. The model seems good. I'll be talking about what we're working on in the model. We are going to, as needed, we are going to evaluate the model and possibly upgrade the model for the modeling work that will be done for the 5-year update. We indicated the estimated cost to mitigate damages to shallow wells in the shallow well policy program at about $75,000 a well. Well, the most recent number we just got was replacement well was $100,000. So we're not far off there, maybe a little light, but we have money in the shallow well impact evaluation and mitigation to address some of these issues. So the next PowerPoint talks about the projects. Go down there, I see it. Import of water program, project number 1. It's number 1 priority. We made huge progress today, folks. It's about a third of what we need in imported water supply based on what we know right now. Recycle water program. We're going to have a more detailed report on the recycle water program at the Water Resource Manager report. Jeff Halsey will provide that. I'll give an overview here in a few minutes. Conservation, short discussion, and then certainly the shallow well identification, evaluation, mitigation program. Most of you know what's going on there, but we'll be talking about that. So hitting the next slide, the project number 1, imported water program, certainly the most important project if we're going to attain some sustainability. Great comments from some of the folks today, public comments about the issues of new wells and about how important it is that we address overdraft. Their concerns about new wells, we totally understand. I mean, the whole issue here is to try to get sustainability, and I think they're out in front of that concern with their concerns for new wells. So recycled water, again, more detail later on. We do have a table that demonstrates this. If somebody would like to see it, I would certainly make it available to you. Just email me and I'll send it to you. We provided to the GA staff, which includes the water district. But it's very clear on what we're looking at on the numbers that full maximum use of the recycled water project with the upgrade, with the expansion, does not meet domestic Navy needs going forward without augmentation with imported water. It doesn't do it. So that's the conclusion that we came to for project number 1 is recycled water is important. We got to do it. We've got to use all we can. We got to move forward on it. There's no question about that. But it doesn't do the job if you want to maintain this community. It just doesn't do the job. And again, I've got a table that shows that. It shows with and without cereals. It shows assumes 100% use of the recycled water, which may not occur. So it may be a little bit on the objective side. But I'll provide that table. Just email me and I'll send it to you. Proposed construction, project construction, roughly 10 years for the sustainable, like the imported water project. Imported water entitlement purchase funded by the replenishment fee. You had a great discussion on that today. A lot of congratulations. There's a note here about how this will go, how this project will proceed, determined by the imported water users themselves. And that really relates to an issue that's been before the board and been before the public discussion. And that relates to financing and, the ability to finance going forward, the water district too, and make money available can make things go faster. Having money on hand through financing can make things go faster. So how it goes forward depends on how people step up and actually participate. So the imported water program, interconnection design phase. As everybody, we reported at the last meeting that, 2 meetings ago possibly, applied for and got $7.6 million grant for the pipeline design, environmental compliance. We have not received a fully a completed, executed agreement yet. But I will report, and it'll probably be reported again under Water Resource Manager. I just had a conversation with Derek at DWR last week because I was concerned about getting this agreement back. Derek confirmed they have everything we need. He's done everything he needs to do. It's at his boss and the management level to finalize the agreement and send it to us. We expect it any day. So there's certainly no issues related to us getting that $7.6 million and using it for our pipeline project for imported water. But we also reported their RFP was put out for the pipeline, preliminary pipeline alignment, and to a certain extent, some environmental compliance for that pipeline alignment. We did get bids in. Jeff will be reporting on, I believe, going to report today on the bids that did come in. We have created an evaluation team. I don't think the evaluation team is going to take too long. There's not a lot. I don't see a lot of evaluation needed for making a selection. But we're intending to bring this back possibly, just so everybody knows, a special meeting in July for the board to approve that agreement with a consultant and get the consultant started working on this project. Big step to do. Again, we're doing all this before we even have an agreement. Retroactively, we can apply the cost to the grant we're receiving. So we're moving forward on this. We're also, interconnection. At this point, we're looking to have the design phase under this grant fund of $7.6 million. Design phase for the pipeline. Preliminary projection is 2025 to have the complete design done. Right now, we're just getting started. We're also in discussions with federal and state agencies to help fund the actual construction of the infrastructure. Also just having discussions with the Navy. So work is being done. Capital Corps is very, very much involved in it, but we're working on funding. We realize the financial requirements for an infrastructure project. They're significant. I don't think this community can afford it. We have to have outside funding, and that's the way we're going about looking for outside funding. So next slide has to do with the water purchase. Just for your information, we have looked and looked. We didn't expect it. We have looked for grant funding to help us purchase water. It's just not there. Federal and state grants, just so far that we've seen, do not provide money for purchase of water or water rights. Projects, yes, but water rights, no. So that's why we're on our own. That's why we have a replenishment fee. So the replenishment fee was adopted to fund supplemental water supplies, which includes imported water. So it has been used and is being used to a certain extent to help with the recycled water project, which is a supplemental supply. As of now, you heard a report earlier today, the authority is looking at financing some of these costs. There were discussions, everybody's aware, there were discussions at the water district level to see if the water district would participate in financing the cost of the replenishment fee that they are seeing to spread those costs out. To date, the water district has determined that that's not what they prefer to do. It's their decision, or their electric board. But at this point, the water district has elected not to finance the cost of bringing imported water to this basin for what their costs are. This is pretty obvious, but financing would lower the cost impact to current users by spreading those costs to future users who also benefit the purchase. The whole idea, folks, is these are big costs. They're for long-term sustainability, and the folks that are going to be here for the next 20, 50 years ought to participate in these costs. So that's why financing does, to a certain extent, does make sense. And the last bullet point just is relation to interest rates. You heard it today. When I prepared this, I wasn't aware of what some of the folks from Wolf they were going to present, but you heard it today. When we were looking at this originally, interest rates were a lot lower. They're higher now. Things are going to cost more. Financing is a good idea, but interest rates are going up. So if we're going to do something, sooner is better than later. So that's where we're at. Next one is the water purchase. This is a little bit repetitive. We've had good negotiations on table entitlement. I'm actually impressed and amazed that we're able to get to where we are as fast as we did. I mentioned before, it's about a third of the basin needs, so we're in pretty good shape. Prices generally been agreed to. I think we're looking at bringing the agreement back and getting this thing sewn up in the next several weeks. And we're also looking at the long-term financing. So we're a little bit repetitive of what was also on the agenda, but this is an update. That's what we're working on. The purchase of this imported water, this is just my own note. You should look at it, both the board and the public, the stakeholders. This is an asset for the GA, and it's an asset for the basin, and an asset for everybody in the basin. You're purchasing an asset. It's going to get more valuable as time goes on. That's why we're doing it. Recycle water program. As we all know, the city is in need of an upgrade, a relocation, or an upgrade and expansion. That's all going on, secondary level. We have an agreement between the GA and the city. And again, just to be open and transparent, this was not the GA's direction to go out and get an agreement with the city. The city came to the GA and we put together an agreement to get this project done. I think we've got good people who want to produce a project and get this moving. They're working on it. We have a good team. Jeff will provide more detail on the water resource management report. I've indicated that we did a lot of initial work. PAC was very helpful. Don Decker, always helpful on reviewing the different options for recycled water. I'll reiterate again, part of our initial look at the recycled water was there was a certain amount of knowledge about what made sense and what didn't make sense, but we needed everything in one place. So we did evaluation of several different alternative uses of recycled water. We did the due diligence on them. We've pretty much eliminated everything from a practical nature except direct injection, which is an agreement with what the water district wants to do. So we are on the same page. Water district's on the team. But right now, our conclusions are direct injection makes the most sense, and we're working on that. We're actually having a call. I'll report this because it's brand new. We're actually going to have a call tomorrow morning with Capital Corps in regards to potential funding for recycled water treatment, potential federal funding. So we're going to do that tomorrow morning. So things are moving there. So we got some cost in here. It's not cheap. And remember, interest rates are huge when you're looking at cost. The GSP estimated somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 acre feet based upon interest rates. The Water District, in a 2019 presentation, estimated 2,300 acre feet. Very, very expensive anyway, but they only used a 1% interest rate. You add 4% to that, which is where we're at now. We're higher than we were now, even now. But if you add 4% to that, you're up around the 4,000 acre foot. $4,000 an acre. So it's not going to be cheap, but it is a local resource. And from our perspective, we need to evaluate it. We need to put it to beneficial use before we buy anything else. We need to make sure we are using our local resources. So conservation, we've been reporting on the SDAC program, currently being finalized. It was all done with grant money. I want everybody to realize that the conservation work that was done through the Groundwater Authority was all grant money. We did a lot of different projects, looked at a lot of different things. Frankly, we didn't get a lot of low-hanging fruit out of that work. But again, we have done the work. We've documented the effort. We've documented what we've done, so it won't be done again. We move forward on conservation efforts. The GA's approach, it's in the GSP. Conservation is in the GSP. We will need to address it in the update. Our approach right now is the Water District has a pretty extensive water conservation program. We intend to both coordinate and communicate with the Water District for the basin-wide conservation programs and try to work out conservation programs throughout the basin, following it as much as possible the Water District's lead on that. So the next slide involves shallow well mitigation program. Everybody knows, I think, who's listening, why we've created the program. We've got a lot of accolades from DWR for including that program in the GSP. They looked at it as be a linchpin to the program, because you've got to address impacted parties if you're going to allow continued overdraft for a period of time to bring imported water. So it was a linchpin. We got a lot of accolades for doing it. We have it in place. We have it funded. We are working on things, and I think it's finally starting to develop into a useful policy. We have the funding. We're seeing shallow wells go dry. We're going to see more and more money and time spent on addressing shallow well impacts. I will also remind everybody that we do have an emergency funding provision that is somewhat discretionary with the general manager and the water resources manager, primarily the general manager, for application to come in for immediate emergency funding for a water supply, hauling water, evaluate a well, things like that. There is funding available and it's in place. So this program is being funded by the replenishment fee charge and also those using the transient pool water. It's a carve out for just this program. I think everybody's aware of that. I've already mentioned the emergency assistance program. So getting on to other projects. Somebody earlier mentioned, somebody mentioned the brackish water. I think they were looking at this PowerPoint. We haven't heard much of the brackish water project for quite a long time. We included it in the GSP out of courtesy of the Water District and the Brackish Water Group, who we know a lot of the folks working on that. So we included it as part of the GSP to make sure we were following it. And whatever came out of that made sense, beneficial use, helped us get to our solution. If it made sense, we would include it in the GSP in our update. We still haven't seen anything that does that. We had reservations then, and this isn't anything new, so I don't want to make it sound like it's something new. People have been asked at the board level multiple times, what is the brackish water and is it new water? And the answer is no, it's not new water. If it was going to be a project the way we see it, it could only be used as a potential bridge to get to an imported water project. That it could be some water that you could treat and possibly allow some people to continue to pump water and use water in the basin over and above our sustainable yield until we got imported water. But even then, please understand, the amount of brackish water in the basin is included in our sustainable yield. This is not new water. It's part of the entire basin. So it does affect our basin management as you go forward. If anybody from the Water District would like to comment, we're welcome to it. From what we understand is that the Brackish Water Group is in a position where it is appearing as though a brackish water project may not be financially feasible at this time. It's just costs too much money for what the gain is, and it is not a long-term solution, as I mentioned. So looking forward on our 2025 update and recommended corrective actions, very briefly, I mentioned already before, substantial work is already underway. We're working on this. We started working on this on day one. We had an internal meeting that went through every one of the recommended corrective actions, and we developed a game plan on how we're going to resolve it. We assigned staff to each one of them. We are working on it. Heather's she's not on the line because she's not available today. Heather's kind of leading that up right now, but we are working on it. It is underway. The GSP update for 2025, it has been prepared. We have prepared the outline and what we want that GSP to look at already. It was prepared about a month or two ago. Heather prepared it. I reviewed it. It's in good shape. It's our outline. It's our guidepost getting to 2025. So we're not sitting around waiting for something to happen. We're in front of the game, and we plan to be ready to submit in time for the 2025 update requirements. So again, the next slide, GSP update and recommended corrective actions. Current task, there's a revived C&E plan. Everybody's aware that the communication plan is being looked at. PAC's working on it. I know Carol is working on it. This is one of the things that Carol does very well is communications. That's where our education, if you didn't know, that's where education comes from, and communications. So we have good people working on this. It's going forward. Our CMP and our technical modeling group for the CMP, this is for the model. This is for the basin model. The one that is currently co-owned by the GA and by DRI, the Navy, basically DRI. We have co-ownership on this model. In order to have the co-ownership, we did create this CMP. This is a management plan for managing the model. This plan, what it does is it lays out the methods by which this model can be used by the Groundwater Authority for the benefit of the basin. And it includes a technical modeling group that is involved in every decision. A lot of work's been done. Jean's going to report on that later in the Water Resource Manager report, on the meetings she's already had, the issues that are being addressed. And all of this is in preparation for gathering the data and the information, evaluating it, and if appropriate, taking that information, putting it into our model, updating the model with DIR involved in it, updating the model, and make sure that the model has the most current data before we run it for the 2025 update. That is all scheduled and in place right now. And Gene will report on that progress under the Water Resource Manager report. Draft contingency plan. DWR asked for a plan on what we're going to do if we don't get imported water. I will tell you that, just going back a little bit, before we concluded imported water was necessary, this plan was prepared. We worked it on in here. We worked out of the GA staff. We did this 2 years ago and said, what does this basin look like without imported water? Even if we knock out all of the ag, if we just get down to the basic needs, what does that look like? So we already did it. I pulled it out. I've already redone it and updated it. So it hasn't been released yet because we need to do internal review. GA staff needs to review it. But I'll just let you know that we're way ahead of this. We've already done this. It had to be done before we concluded that imported water was needed. It only made sense. Groundwater dependent ecosystems monitoring plan. Gene will report on that during Water Resource Management report. She's working on it. It's part of the corrective action, recommended corrective actions, and Gene is working on that. Last item I have, I know this didn't take very long, the TAC. We've had a lot of issues with the TAC. I think we're going to get a new member, which is good. We lost 2 members. Everybody's aware. I'm still not sure totally why we lost them. But we lost Eddie Teasdale, representing Meadowbrook. We lost Tim Parker, representing the Water District. Director Vittora mentioned that today. I'm not sure why we lost them. We needed them. They were valuable. They provided great input. I don't see the conflicts. I don't see why there would have been a conflict, but we lost them. We're going ahead without them, and we're going ahead with a technical review with the folks that are interested in technical review. We will, at some point going forward, once we get organized a little bit better. Right now, the CMP work with the technical modeling group, that is the most important to get the model going. So that is what we're working on, and we have technical folks working on that. But we will, going forward, have some level of technical meetings with technical people attending, open to the public, whether it's Zoom or in person, whether it's a TAC meeting or just a Groundwater Authority, Water Resources Manager, technical workshop, whatever it is, we will have them. So that's part of our GSP. It's an important part of the GSP. We have not walked away from those. As I listed, we've already evaluated and distributed 14 different items that we want the TAC to look at. We've somewhat prioritized them. We got input back from the TAC on those. That's the direction where we're going on the TAC, and there's a lot of very important items there that are going to have TAC input and will not be moved forward on until TAC has reviewed them. GA staff is good, and then we bring it to the board and the public, and everybody will see what we reviewed, what the conclusions were, and what the recommendations is going forward. Would ultimately end up in the GSP update. So, I think that's the end of mine. I'd like to first ask if any of the staff, Keith, Phil, Carol, April, Jeff, have anything to add to my fairly brief presentation. Anybody?
Oh, great job, Steve.
It sounded good, Steve.
Okay. So then I'll be open to questions.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a short statement. Much of what I'm going to say I've said before, so I'll make this brief. The GSP review by DWR listed 19 areas that DWR wanted addressed. I guarantee DWR will be looking specifically at those 19 areas to see if we have performed the needed corrective action. We need to answer the mail. I suggest that future progress reporting address each of the DWR listed areas to ensure none of them is going to slip through the crack. And Steve, if you've got any questions about where those 19 are, I'd be glad to send you a listing of them.
No, thank you for that, Director Vittoria. We have them. Our review, as I mentioned, as soon as we came in, we had an internal review. We refer to them as 7 recommended corrective actions. In those 7 recommended corrective actions, there are sometimes multiple items that are related, but we will be addressing every item that was mentioned in the DWR review through responses on the corrective actions. And we've already outlined how we're going to do that. So yes, thank you. We will make sure that all of those items are addressed.
Thank you.
Steve, thanks for the report. It's John Vallejo. Board, just need to apologize. I have to leave to Sacramento, so I'm going to be leading the meeting now. Thank you all for everything today.
Yeah, thank you, Director Vallejo. Any other questions from the board?
I just have comments. So going back to the sustainability project number 1, particularly the water purchase, I just wanted to kind of go over, looking back at the interest rates that we discussed with Wolf Hansen earlier. You know, if we go back to a year or two ago when we were looking at purchasing water and funding it, those interest rates have gone up approximately 1.5% to 2%. And I just want to state that, you know, had the water district elected to take charge of this at that point in time and worked, you know, either on their own to come to a solution with it or worked with the GA, we'd probably be looking at a much lower cost than we're going to be looking at today. And ultimately, that comes right back down to the ratepayers.
Scott, can you speak a little closer to the mic, please?
Which ultimately comes back down to the ratepayers, which are constituents of the city, and it's going to end up costing us more money. I commend the board and the staff and everybody who has worked so hard on moving forward and taking the leadership on imported water and looking at getting this funding. So, you know, we are where we're at, but it really shows the point that, you know, time is of essence. Procrastinating on some of these important issues, as it shows right here objectively, ends up costing us money. Again, I commend the board and our staff and everyone that has been working so diligently on moving this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Heyman. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I'm really excited about this, the progress that we're making, and I also commend staff for getting us to this point and for sharing this update. I think this is really good information that's going to help clear up things for some folks that still maybe don't have a full handle on our GSP yet and where we're at with that. So thank you for this presentation today, Steve.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Fun to do it.
Any other questions or comments from the board before we go to public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll open it up for public comment.
Sorry, I guess I get to be the annoying one today. So, of course, you know, the staff does an amazing job almost every time they do a presentation with the information. However, There's a caveat to that. Slide 2 has some information that is upsetting to myself. For those of you who are not aware, I'm a Trona resident. I do not live within the city of Ridgecrest. So certain things and certain comments continue to be brought up, like modeling with or without SVM, modeling with or without Trona being there, making statements that the Navy takes priority over other employers within the region. That is not acceptable, period, full stop. While the Navy is an important employer, naturally they do employ many thousands of workers within the area, so does SVM, and so does AG. It is unacceptable for both staff or any member of this board to ignore the other employers within the region. That is not okay, and it's never going to be okay with me. If you're going to model without SVM being there, you also have to model within that same frame of mind who is taking over the infrastructure and costs to get the water to Searles Valley, domestic and commercial, because we do have businesses over there. How do we get the water to those customers? Because while y'all can sit up here and say that SVM has to do this or has to do that, that is not always the case. And a contingency plan has to be put in place if you're going to model for that. And I have yet, over the last couple of years, heard of a contingency plan to take that into account. What it comes off as somebody like me who lives over there, is that these model, potentially, the game plan is, my town doesn't exist, that it doesn't matter. She matters to me, and she matters to the 2,000 residents who live there. This is not a game. Importation, of course, is important. I'm for it if done appropriately, if done in a financially feasible manner. However, like I said, the Navy does not and will not and should not take a priority over everybody else, because on slide 2, it only says domestic and naval needs. Other employers have a priority too. Other residents outside of this basin who rely on this basin have a priority too. So please, going forward, like I said years ago, keep us in mind and just stop, because it becomes extremely frustrating. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
So I just want to assure you that the residents of Trona have been in the mind of the board and the agency from the beginning, which is why domestic water service to Trona is excluded from the replenishment fee, just like domestic water throughout the rest of the basin. Or I guess I should say in this basin, as you guys are in a different basin. But nevertheless, despite that difference, we've taken the same care and caution to make sure that the domestic water supply for Trona is uninterrupted as we have for everywhere else. We've got to separate out Searles Valley Minerals, and I know you've expressed concerns that and Searles has stated a few times that if they go out of business that there'll be an interruption of the domestic water supply. We believe that statement is inaccurate. Searles Valley Minerals, the company, is not the regulated utility. There is a separate regulated utility that has an independent responsibility to make sure that the water continues to flow to the residents of Trona, regardless of whether that Searles Valley Minerals mining company is in operation or not. And I can assure you that I know personally that the regulators that are responsible for making sure that that happens have been informed of this situation and are taking a very close look at it. So the GA is very mindful of the relationship between the domestic water service and the water service to the mine. We're taking particular care regarding that issue as we move forward to require the mine to pay the replenishment fee. As far as the priorities go, I'm not sure every instance that you're referring to priorities, but just be aware that when water lawyers talk about priorities, they're typically talking about groundwater priority which is a legal concept, not priorities in terms of a value judgment, between this job and that job. I'm not sure how it was used in the report specifically. I don't have that in front of me, but just understand that when we're talking about, if we say that the basin, that the base has a superior groundwater right or a higher groundwater priority, that's making a legal statement about their Federal Reserve rights, not a value judgment about the value of that job compared to somebody else's job.
Thank you, Mr. Lemieux, for that clarification. Any other members of the public would like to speak on this item?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just to add to what Keith said, and to help, forget her name, I had it written down, Regina, to help Regina understand, my mention of doing an evaluation of of imported water needs with or without cereals had nothing to do with saying cereals should or shouldn't exist. What it has to do with is cereals is not participating right now, not even with discussions about participating in our GSP or our basin management. I just want people to see that for imported water requirements, if cereals is going to continue to operate, imported water requirements are higher. If they're not going to operate, they're a little lower, but we still need imported water. So that's the point. The point had nothing to do with making an assessment or a judgment or even a suggestion about whether cereals should or should not operate. I just want to make sure Regina understood that my focus is on how much imported water do we really need, depending on who is in the basin and who's operating and who's not. That was it.
Thank you, Steve.
Just really quick, I wanted to remind the members of the public to state your name before your comment. It's happened a couple of times, so just please remember to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, April. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm John Gorman, and this is a bit spontaneous, though I brought up this practical issue, with the City Council a couple of meetings ago during that continuing agenda item where the Council speaks to the GA. And that is the DWR's sensitivity to having the shallow well owners and operators, all of them, to the party. There are quite a few that aren't. You might not even know who they are or where their wells are. Every time somebody suggests a figure to me, how many of those who might have been chased away by the Inyo Kern Senior Center in Broglio of 5 or 6 years ago have been under their rocks and not been forthcoming with participating in these ongoing discussions, though I sense the DWR would like to see them involved. And my idea was how to get them involved. I had a notion of, and this would probably have to be handled through the Water District, but initiated by the Groundwater Authority. That is, make sure that all the well owners in the valley understand that they could get their water tested just for free. Also, they could get their wells a cursory look at for depth and perhaps drawdown or any other quick measure of health that they may want but perhaps can't afford or don't need or don't know that it's important. If this body could offer those carrots to draw in the domestic well owners who you haven't heard from, it might be a very good idea. You'd get data that you know is valuable. Everybody would. We would. But it would take money. I got a feeling that it would be best be facilitated through the Water District, but with Groundwater Authority money. And I'm wonderfully naive about any other details associated with this. But when I bring it up, whoever's listening tends to be nodding with some approval. That's all I have to say. If there's any questions, this concept needs to be crystallized much further, and I'm not the one to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Sophia Merck. I have great concerns in regards to this body. They use terms that are derogatory against other people that live in the valley. And a case in point is 2 speakers ago. You know, so when you look at the shallow well program that they're supposed to have, and you look at the term that they use, discretionary, I question whether who is really going to look it over, and will they have prejudices against a person in regards to these discretionary monies that might be allocated for shallow well. Just like I have some question in regards to the tone of some of the board members. You know, case in point, the city council member, you know, was chastising the Indian Wells Valley Water District in regards to interest rates. You know, there's better ways of doing things. We're all human beings. We live in this community. We used to work together, not against each other. We used to have a really, really good program, the Cooperative Water Management Group that met once a month. They accomplished quite a bit, even though they were on both sides of the table. And I know this really doesn't pertain to the topic that we're on, except for the fact I'm really tired, and so are a lot of the public, of the chastising between the groups. And it can't go forward. The good news is we got the plan approved by the state of California. That's the good news. That's what we were working on. But it's time to come together and don't do it with words against a population that lives in Trona or a person that lives in Inyakern. Don't do that. Thank you.
Ma'am, could you be more specific with what terms you said were being used that are derogatory toward a group, or?
Well, I find it offensive that Trona is being ignored. There, you know, we have a certain population that live in Ridgecrest that works in Trona.
Understood. I just want you to know Trona is in no way, shape, or form being ignored right now.
I just think that this board is not practicing kindness or niceness, and I'm really offended by it. I've tried calling in. My phone keeps getting dropped at the other end, so it's very difficult for some of us to call in. I mean, I could really give, you don't post the phone numbers, you don't have a sign-in sheet. I used to attend all the meetings, and it's been very difficult for the public to do it. You need to outreach more, and you're not. And it's really, really starting to look like the only people that count is the Navy and the city.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I'm really sad to say this, but it's true.
Okay, thank you for
We
your comments.
used to be a community, and we're not anymore.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Judy Decker. I wanted to point out some things to some of the speakers that have just come. They need to educate themselves on the technical terms that are being used, in particular by Stetson engineers. I believe there were some misconceptions about modeling. The modeling is strictly technical water modeling, and that's all it is. The other thing I wanted to point out to Mr. Gorman is if you have a private well, you can call the water district, and you used to be able to do this, and I presume you still can. They take samples of their wells all the time, and you can get the proper bottle, take it in, and they will send it in with theirs. You have to pay for it, however. And whenever anybody talks about something free, they need to remember that it isn't. Somebody somewhere is going to pay for it.
Thank you. Any other public speakers in the room? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the phones. Okay. Go ahead, caller. Caller, go ahead. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Mike Neal. Just like to first, echo some of the sentiments of Mrs. Merck and some of the things she said. Although it was off topic, glad you at least let her make the statements. Putting the Navy putting them forward anyway as the owner of all the water in the valley that's what's caused this whole problem. And now you've got groups against groups, and you're all well aware which ones are fighting against the GA and maybe even making accusations to the water district. I'm not aware that anybody's made any accusations against Searles except, of course, the GA. Taking them to court, filing suit against them, telling you got to pay $6 million or quit pumping your water. Well, and all this while, and I brought this up numerous times, ignoring the fact that if they're successful in that endeavor, and Searle says, "Well, phooey, we can't make enough money if we do that," then hundreds and hundreds, literally, of jobs, the lost families being thrown out of the valley. That's an unacceptable approach. And of course, why would anybody expect the board to listen since they've been asked for 4 years to move their meetings to a more attendable time, and never one time that I don't recall if ever even discussed it, not even for 2 or 3 minutes. So, when you don't think a board is listening, you don't get any participation, but you do get a lot of consternation and distrust and so forth. And sorry, but that's what we got. And now, as far as factual matters, I got a question I would like some a little more detail on. I note a glaring difference on the recycle water program slide, where it stated that the GSP estimated the cost of recycled water from the wastewater treatment plant to be, $4,000 to $5,000 per acre feet, whereas the water district has estimated at $2,300 an acre feet. I'd like to know where those figures came from, where the details of the analysis can be found, and whether just the difference, how much of the difference lies in the GSP saying it could be either 2 or 4%, and the water district being 1%. So somebody can respond to that after I get off here and let me know where to find that. I really find it kind of glaring to see that something wasn't done to sit down with the water district that they were supposed to be working with and come up with the same or at least very close estimates for that. But they just throw out, well, we say it's going to cost twice as much as what the water district says. So That's totally confusing to the public and should not. But they should figure out who was wrong and get a good figure, a good solid figure that can be backed up and people can believe in. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I think I can help.
Sure thing. Go ahead.
For Mr. Neal, I guess I should apologize. I should have been clearer on that. There is reference on the slide to where they come from. There's a 2019 report presentation by the Water District. That's where it came right out of their report. If you ask, we can send it to you. We have it, or certainly I'm sure Don or Water District will get it for you. The other numbers came right out of the GSP, so those numbers right out of the GSP. So those are documents that have already been done. You're right. I should have mentioned that. I didn't mention that we have a technical team working on this, which includes the Water District and the city and the GA. We haven't gotten to the estimated cost of a direct injection project yet, because our next step is, and Jeff will be reporting this, our next step is to go to the regional board and determine what the requirements might be from the regional board to permit such a project. Once we are sure that we have the permitting guidelines squared away, we will work through the cooperative group, that technical group, and produce a cost estimate that is consistent. We're not as far off as those numbers appear. I just want to let you know that. We are not as far off as those numbers appear that you're concerned about. Certainly not twice as much. Interest rates made a big difference. Some of the assumptions make a difference. We're not that far off. I'll let you know that.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Okay, next caller, please. Caller, go ahead. Go ahead, caller. Caller, go ahead. Okay, looks like we lost him. Okay, any other members of the public that would like to comment on this? Okay, seeing none, I think that takes us to item number 13, the Water Resource Manager's Report.
Sorry, I was on mute. I tried to mute. Sure, we're ready to go. I mentioned who's here. I think Jeff and Myra are going to start. Jeff can introduce Myra. I'm turning it over to them. They've covered most of it. They're doing a great job. Things are going well. But Jeff, if you're ready, go ahead with Myra. And then Gene is also on the line. Jeff? No mute? Oh, hold on. I could look outside my door because he's here. Jeff? Jeff's on. I think Jeff's on. I'm back. Jeff, can you hear us? April, do you know if Jeff's been admitted?
I see a window that says Stetson, but I'm not
one
sure
from
if that's
Myra.
Jeff.
There's one from Myra too. That's got to be Jeff under Stetson, and then there's Myra there, but they should both be on.
Sounds like he might be having mic issues because he's unmuted,
Yeah.
but we can't hear him.
I'm going to let him come into my office and see if he wants to do it in here. Sorry about this, folks. Hold on. Jeff, you guys want to come into my office? Okay, sorry, folks, a little bit on the fly. I got Jeff and Myra in my office now. I'm going to get out of my chair and give them some room.
Okay.
This is a little on the fly.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. We were having trouble with our remote mic, I guess. Well, I'll just want to introduce Myra Lopez, one of our engineers who's assisting us with our grant program and other projects now. And she's going to give the update on the Prop 1 and the Prop 68 status.
These are all nice people, Myra, don't worry.
All right, good afternoon, members of the public and the board. Starting off with the Prop 1 status.
Myra, we're unable to hear you. Can you please get a little closer to the mic?
Sorry. Starting off with the Prop 1 status update. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yes, we can. Kind of.
Okay, perfect. So invoice 12A and invoice 13A, both have received payments back in June. Invoice 12A totaling $132,693.95, and invoice 13A total requested payment about $299.70. The invoice 14A, that one was a total request payment of $64,941.88. That one is currently under DWR review. Next off, invoice 15B, that one is currently in progress and will be due by the end of August. So next slide, going into Prop 68, that one has 3 invoices. Let's see, invoice 13B, totaling request payment after retention about $272.09. DWR staff has received payments back in June. And so going off invoice 14B, that one has a total request payment after retention of $1,885.36. That one is currently under review, and so we'll expect to hear that back soon. Invoice 15B is currently in progress and will be due by the end of August.
And with that, if anybody has any questions on any of our updates on the proposition invoice processing? If not, I'll go on to discuss the Sigma implementation grant status.
Yeah, let me see if anybody has any questions real quick. Jeff, any questions from the board?
Yeah, in case you did, sure no.
Okay, seeing none, go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, the Sigma implementation grant, the Groundwater Authority has received a grant for $7.6 million. The final funding agreement is under review by DWR right now. We actually got a few additional questions from them. I believe it was Monday. We should get those back to them today or tomorrow. The slide indicates they were anticipating having that agreement executed in mid-July. They told us when they sent these last questions over that it will probably slip into August before they execute the final funding agreement, but they haven't raised any significant issues with it. It's just their processing has taken some time. The first project that we'll do under the grant agreement is an imported water pipeline alignment study. The board authorized release of a request for proposal to get consultants to work on that. The board authorized that on May 11th. We had a pre-proposal meeting on June 2nd to discuss the project with potential consultants. The consultant proposals were due on Monday of this week. We've received 2 proposals. They're being reviewed now. We will make a determination of which of the firms that proposed that we would recommend to the board to award the contract to. Some of our next steps on this is we do need to get the grant agreement executed once DWR gets it back to us. The board has already authorized that execution based on the application that was submitted. As I mentioned, we're in the process now of reviewing the proposals. We need to select that consultant and prepare a recommendation to the board. We would like to suggest a special board meeting, that we not wait until the next board meeting to award this. We got this award of $7.6 million. The work under this grant agreement has to be done by April 30th of 2025. So that's not a lot of time to get take advantage of all that funding. So we'd like to move as quickly as we can. We'd like to coordinate, ask if staff could coordinate with the board to schedule a special board meeting later this month. Staff, your GA staff will be discussing the proposals that were selected, that were submitted to this discussion will take place tomorrow. And probably after that, we'd like to discuss setting up a special board meeting later this month to award that. That's what I have on Sigma. If there's any implementation grant, if there's any questions on that.
Not seeing any. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, I'll go to the recycled water program. Sections 1 through 5 of our recycled water alternatives analysis have been reviewed by the technical team, which, as Stephen mentioned, includes water district representation and representation from the city. As Steve mentioned, the analysis has evaluated the different alternatives that are available for the use of the recycled water and determined the advanced treatment of the recycled water that'll come out of the city's new wastewater plant, and then injecting all of that treated recycled water into the groundwater basin is the most feasible project. We are looking at scheduling a meeting with the regional board. We, in one of our sections of our analysis, outlined the requirements for this type of project that have been established by the state board. But we want to talk one-on-one with the staff about inform them where we're at and get any particular issues they want us to address as we move forward and talk about their process. The city, actually, there was reference to the city's cost estimate on an injection project. The city's consultants, Krieger and Stewart, along with Tim Parker, had also identified a potential injection site when they had looked at an injection project. And Krieger and Stewart are on our team, and it suggested there was a preliminary evaluation done of that injection site. We're going to develop some criteria to look at the injection site a little more closely using some of the state board's criteria, just to further evaluate that we've got a good site for the injection. And we also want to continue developing the project. We've got the concept. We've done some technical work previously on an injection project. We want to get more details on what the needed advanced treatment is. But we need to evaluate the site, whether there's room and whether it is compatible for the advanced treatment to be at the city's wastewater site, which is under an agreement with the Navy since it's on the Navy's property, and whether that fits into that. It may not. So we may need to identify another site, look at things like storage needs, and develop some of the preliminary design criteria. So if additional funding does become available for the recycled water project, it's ready to start implementing. We've also been coordinating with Capital Corps on potential funding. They certainly take the lead on that. Any information or support that we can provide, we talk to Capital Corps. And we anticipate we'll have a draft technical memo laying out all the work I've talked about that we've already completed and the work we're doing to have that later this year. That's what I have on recycled water. If there's any questions on that.
Not seeing any. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, with that, I am going to turn it over to Jean Moran. She should be on the line. She has some additional items under the Water Resource Manager report. With that, I'll turn it over to Jean.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, public and members of the board. My 4 slides are related to the technical work and field work that's been being completed during the last month. The first slide is about the data collection and an update to our monitoring program. In June, Nicole went out in the field and replaced a pressure transducer with KCWA. We are collecting at about 10 wells every other hour data. So we're collecting more water level measurements on a pressure transducer to see what both seasonal, monthly water levels are looking like in certain areas throughout the basin. She also visited 27 well sites to assess how the wellheads were. There are a number of wells that may have caps that are missing or some damage to the wellhead, and we are doing an assessment in the monitoring program to for making recommendations for next year's funding to handle some of the wells that are not in up to standard. Also, the water quality sampling summary from last fall has been written up for the annual report, and we're currently reviewing it internally and plan to submit it to the TAC by the end of this month. Also, the sampling plan for the water quality in fall of 2022, as well as other data collection, is being written up, and that field work will be conducted in October, and we will be submitting in September to the TAC that work plan so that they can make any comments on it. The water quality, the water level measurements that are planned in October will probably be the first week of October. We've already been coordinating with KCWA on when their field staff will be ready for being in the field so that we can also coordinate with the Navy so all water levels will be collected within the same week. KCWA does have their COVID-19 field restrictions lifted, so it is anticipated that they will be able to collect more of the groundwater levels this fall. The next slide. The configuration management plan that we are working under for updating the GSP model and using the GSP model has been having almost weekly meetings during June and early July. We are working through using the data management system on the website. And by the way, the data on that website is available to the public, and it contains all the data we've collected through the spring water levels. It also contains contour maps that are also available to the public and the board members. The website is Indian Wells Valley IWVGSP.com. Just logging into the public does not require a password. It will default into the public website. We have been working with the DMS on a special website that we've set up with it that also includes model results and current data and also pumping well locations as we review all the most recent data plus historical data plus simulated data with the technical model group. We've been doing Teams video conference calling. We are planning a field trip to orient everybody to the basin. We have a couple new people on in this group, and we want to make sure that the technical people are aware of the different areas of the basin. We will be doing structure and the water budget. It will probably be next week, but it might be the week after. We are still confirming everybody's schedule to be able to make it. We are currently reviewing mostly the recent data, and starting tomorrow, we also have a call tomorrow, we are starting to review faulting and new structure data since the GSP was written. Next slide. Sorry, I have to advance mine at the same time. The Navy has been working on the groundwater dependent ecosystems. Historically, through last summer and through this year, 9 different potential GDE sites were visited, and the Navy's biologists located 3 sites at Rincon areas 6, 8, and 9. I labeled those on the figure to the left. So areas 8 and 9 are more to the northeast of the playa, and area 6 is to the west of the playa. The Navy's biologists performed plant transects 2 weeks ago at locations 6, 8, and 9. We are expecting location maps from the biologists at the end of this week. And from there, we plan to install data loggers at 4 nearby areas by these groundwater dependent ecosystems. In September, once we've have this initial monitoring in place, we plan to add the GDE monitoring to the groundwater monitoring program. The annual report has a new section as of last year that includes changes to the groundwater monitoring program. This GDE monitoring will be included in the water year 2022 annual report. That's why it's being done in September, to make sure that it comes within the deadline of the water year of September 30th. In October, the Navy biologist said that he would be able to give us a technical memo of all of their field work and the annual transects that they will be monitoring for the GDE sites. And then in spring of 2023, another set of annual transects will be done. Meanwhile, on the fall and spring water levels, those sites will be visited and the data from the data loggers will be downloaded for the other part of that monitoring program. The next slide. The wells that are being planned for monitoring subflow from Rose Valley into Indian Wells Valley, just south of Little Lake, are the planning stages. We're finishing up the subcontractor bid package, and we will submit it to the GA board at the next meeting for approval. And once that gets put into place, we will, and we get the bids back, we will complete the Navy contracting. They need a finalized bid with numbers. The monitoring while drilling and construction is planned for later this fall, probably in November or December. And that is what I have currently for this presentation.
Great, thank you.
Are there any questions? You're welcome.
Any questions?
I was curious, has any progress been made toward being able to measure the change to groundwater and storage? It wasn't mentioned during your presentation. I was hoping maybe there was something going on in the background.
That I would, yes. So our current plan is there has been a draft memo, internal draft memo that we are continuing to work on. And we plan, my schedule is to have it to the TAC, a draft memo to the TAC by the end of August on storage changes. Also, KCWA, one of the elements that we're looking at putting into it, KCWA is completing their contouring as we speak. We've been discussing it for the last couple weeks, and Michelle should have that completed soon too, which will go into that memo.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I just have one question, Gene. On the groundwater dependent systems, is that a finite time frame or period that they will be monitored, or is it going to be a long-term project, ongoing type project?
It is a long-term project.
Yeah.
Part of monitoring for groundwater dependent ecosystems, the guidance from GWR is that we will monitor to see if pumping has any influence on the phreatophytic vegetation that requires groundwater to survive. So part of having a biologist be a part of it is looking at the health of vegetation on an annual basis, preferably in the springtime when they're blooming, to make sure that there isn't an effect of pumping doesn't affect their health. So it will be long term.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions. So thank you, Gene and Jeff and Steve and everybody for your report. Next, we'll have public comment. Is there anybody that would like to comment on the water manager's report? Okay, seeing none, we will go to item number 14 now, and that is the general manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of items for you today. In your packet, you have the financials for June, or ending June 30th. Pretty straightforward. Halfway through the year, I think we look pretty good. Also wanted to mention, as Steve brought up earlier, that Director Rotora had been asking for some planning, and we definitely are going to be addressing that as we move into our budget phase. We're going to be looking at our 2022 budget and doing a little planning for, 2023 budget and beyond. And we'll be doing that in August and September in order to bring a budget to the board, ideally at the October meeting. So we're going to work on doing some of that planning and schedule building for some of the known activities that we have, including some of those recommended corrective actions, anything that we might be looking to incorporate into our budget process. So we hope to be hopefully addressing some of or all of what you're looking for over the next couple of months. Also in your packet is a report from Capital Core Group. And I think I saw Todd was still on the line, but they've been working really hard for us, working on negotiating a water rights purchase, as we've been hearing about. Also, we're successful in getting a directive in the federal WRDA bill, Water Resources Development Act, to have the Army Corps of Engineers work on or at least work to study our interconnect project. And then very happy to hear that they were successful in helping the city of Ridgecrest get $2.5 million towards the wastewater treatment project. So all of that is in that report. Todd, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Carol, that pretty much covered it. And thanks to Steve Johnson, he covered most of it in his report. Just to point out that brings a total of $10.1 million in funding to the region for this year. The Capital Corps has brought in, and we look forward to doing more.
Yep, awesome. Thank you. And so, Mr. Chairman, that is all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Carol. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to public comment. Is there any member of the public who wants to comment on this item? Okay, not seeing any. Thanks, Carol. that'll take us to item number 15, and that is the PAC and TAC reports. And for that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Dave Janis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The PAC had been tasked previously with making recommendations on upgrading or updating the communication and engagement plan, specifically with regards to recommending corrective action number 1. And we reported out at the last meeting on that, the general items, and I gave a pretty extensive report on it. And what we did was we said we had divided the task into 2 pieces. These are the recommendations that we make or bring forward for the GA in general regarding communications and engagement itself, regardless of what the plan said, what's needed for this implementation phase, because recommended corrective action number 1 focused on the fact that the previous communication and engagement plan was based on the period to develop the GSP. And now that the GSP had been approved by the DWR, that in fact we were to focus, it should be refocused perhaps on the implementation period of the GSP and the execution of the GSP, which we are now in. And so we're relooking at it from that standpoint. So just having set that ground, we gave you those 4 common areas that all the individual members had agreed on, and actually we brought those forward, and as I said, we summarized it rather extensively for you last time. We commissioned a subcommittee to further deep dive into that, to pull out, take more time to pull out all the comments and further develop them, that the all 8 members of the PAC that had submitted written separate inputs to that, to coalesce those and bring those back to the PAC. So that was the main task out of this meeting. And the subcommittee brought forward a 4-page report. So it went down another level of detail and maybe a little bit more in the case of the social media recommendation, which was one of the 4 included in one of the 4 big recommendations. So I will summarize what the discussion was. First, I presented to the committee what the subcommittee had done. The subcommittee was myself, West Katzenstein, and Regina Troglin. And we had worked together on that quite well, and I met several times, and we brought it back, the 4-page summary, to the PAC. We summarized that, and I'll point out several PAC members expressed concerns with the level of detail being too detailed, perhaps, and the associated costs if all of the recommendations were put forward, regardless of whether we had some volunteer help to execute it or not. We, the Groundwater Authority, had volunteers or full staffing to do that. There was also concern expressed by this board, members of this board, and members of the PAC, again, about the level of social media engagement that we were proposing, and concerns with the sometimes common rat holes. I won't go further to say that the social media takes when you get into exchanges. And as we pointed out last time, there are different levels of engagement you can take in social media. I'll touch more on that. And they were cautiously supportive of the discussion by the time we end. So PAC members were also split regarding, how much volunteers we really could and should use the GA, but that was still brought forward as a recommendation, again, cautiously supportive. There was a large component that Judy brought forward, and in her written comments that she brought to this meeting, and concerns about the 4-page recommendation. So a motion was made to, after an extensive discussion, move to summarize at the level of detail that we summarized in the last PAC report what our recommendations, and present that to you in this report as the recommendation, the actual report of the PAC of our recommendation of this, but to enclose the modified by this discussion 4-page memo to include points of discussion and additional modifications that the full board had agree on, with the intent of giving you the full clarity and context of what the recommendations were. For example, to prioritize some of the focus items and therefore give you guidance or recommended guidance on what priority you should put on the tasks if we're not able to meet all of them with the available funds and resources, staff resources, et cetera. It was also added in that report and my summary here what the concerns were, and that became a new fourth period. Then we also agreed, as we had at the previous meeting, these recommendations were focused on what the GA needs to do with regard to communication and engagement. It was separated from, we will subsequently take up at the next PAC meeting. The committee will meet again, and from those select which things need to be formally summarized at a summary level and put into the formal C&E plan itself. So this is the communication and engagement recommendations. The next time we come here, we will be talking about what changes we recommend to the actual plan itself if we get to that point out of that meeting. Because the committee has only 1 week to meet before we can get there. So in essence, what I will do is I'm not going to read you parts of this. I'm going to summarize what our recommendations were. There were 4 key recommendations out of the final PAC report contained in here. One of them was basically what are the key primary factors that you need to focus on, the GA needs to focus on, and for the execution phase for the GSP. And the first one, and you've heard this from us before many times, the first one and most important one perhaps is the comprehensive integrated schedule that tracks all the projects, budgets, expenditures against them, goals and objectives of the projects, et cetera. That's sometimes been called a POAM, but we don't mean the formal definition of a POAM. We really mean an integrated schedule that captures all of that in the words we've used here. The secondary part of that first recommendation is to provide fact sheets on 2 really key pieces of information. The first was a summary or statement or overall fact sheet on the purpose and objectives for the GSP and the link to achieving sustainability in the basin. Related to that is the data used to underpin it and the model. And so there should be a separate fact sheet, and these are basically all the background that the public needs to understand and should be available to understand in layman's terms in these fact sheets. We've heard that term used today. Layman's terms, what these things mean. And they should have a glossary perhaps and a reference to other documents that they point to, but they would be in layman's terms, concise summary, and most of that existing information is in technical or legal terms inside the GSP. That's the background stuff. The second part of this recommendation is that it's got to bring forward those parts of that are relevant to executing the GSP. So in fact, it's the projects and management actions that are called forward in the GSP, both the primary projects and, as Steve covered today, some of the ones that were called out in the GSP as potential. And I saw today's report by Steve as a first cursory summary at what we were getting at in here, because that's really the first time since the GSP was approved and brought back that we, the public, have been given an exposure to what actions are taken behind the scenes and now being brought forward to the public with regards to what's in the GSP and DWR's response to it. The second major item overall was increasing and improving the public communication and engagement and perhaps new methods of engagement. And within that, there were 3 subsets. The first one, and it underpins all of them, is the website. The website needs a major overhaul, and it needs to convey some key things. It would be the definitive repository of all information, all these fact sheets, for example, all the existing documentation that is not very well organized on that website currently. It's not user-friendly. You can't find out, if you're a layperson, it's very difficult to find out answers to the things that we've mentioned here. So it should be, and I will read this, it should be information that's easier for the public to online search and serve as the source, authority, and location or link to all public release approved documents. It needs to be recognized as a reliable and complete source of information. And I won't go into the subsets down below of how you would point people to that, but in the upcoming discussion on social media, all social media references would be to links in the website, available on the website. It is the sole repository of the definitive information, and it's the central focus that we believe you should have. Social media. We recommend, and there were 2 out of the 3 members of the subcommittee that share some of the skepticism of my generation about social media and some of the public engagement that we see in it and the morass that it could potentially dip into. But after a lot of discussion and deliberation, and the committee as a whole agreed, we believe there's parts of the community that younger parts, it was mentioned by one member, 17 to 35 specifically, that's where they primarily learned, and that's their behavioral engagement model. And although there is a certain citizen responsibility to be informed, and we have legal methods and requirements to do that, the public newspaper of record that we grew up with, some of the youngsters, or younger folks, I shouldn't say, they're not youngsters, they're younger than I am, which is almost everybody in here. But nonetheless, that's the way they're accustomed to getting their information. They don't get it in the newspaper. They don't get it some of them don't get it through all the other methods that we have used, the GA has used in the past on the Communication Engagement Plan or Engagement Authority. And those folks are stakeholders in the Valley. It is the way they access information. And if we can do it, we recommend that we have a 3-step process. We would do a push only first. So it would be notification on, we would select certain social media, like everybody knows Facebook, but that's not where a lot of the young folks are anymore. But Facebook, for example, a lot of the newer media are video-based, like Instagram. I won't say one other one, but I'm giving examples. We recommended, I think, 3 social media sites that we do postings and refer them, carefully to the website for the new fact sheets that are posted, or information if you want it on this. How do you do that? And if that's successful, and we believe it would be, in at least targeting the folks that haven't been reached yet, then we could move to a beginning of a dialogue site where you had, let's say, a Facebook website, and you could schedule a time where the public could ask questions. Moderators would have to be approved and would only be allowed to post links to approved documents on the website. There would be no personal opinions, etc. You could disable responses, or you could enable responses only after review from the public to eliminate some of the bad things, the potential bad things that could happen on the internet. I'm summarizing it at a top level. One of the reasons for the 4 pages of the report, of the subcommittee report, and now the approved PAC reporting closure, was the length required to convey some of the safeguards that the group recommended. And so it would be a step process. We would in my personal opinion, step one is really necessary. Assuming we get the website and the fact sheets and the information levels to where they need to be, we want to go out on social media and start pointing folks to them. That's not enough, but it's a good start, and that's the disagreement and concerns start being expressed by members after you start the two-way engagement. Is, well, do we have enough people to do that? Would that be a time sink? Do we have time? How do we know the people aren't going to say go off on their own, et cetera? I would say that's for us to work out with the staff, or the staff to work out from among themselves. And certainly, if we go down this path, we believe there are some people that would be interested in volunteering and helping with this. The third part of the public engagement involves meetings like the GA itself meeting, but some additional deep dives that we would recommend holding in the evening on key subjects, stakeholder targeted information on individual projects or management actions, for example. The interconnect is a big, obvious one that jumps right up. Shallow well mitigation program at some point also jumps right out. Some of those that we believe could be an evening workshop with folks and opportunity to get them engaged in the community. As part of that public engagement, there was an option. I don't remember where we put it in here. We talked about it last time. We've talked about social media, but there's another way that many people in the valley, on the western side of the valley, tend to get their only common, or often the only common thing they have is the general store. I use air quotes on that, the general store in Indian, the hardware shop. There is a bulletin board there that a lot of the folks that are property owners out in the western side of the town that are by themselves, for a reason, and want some privacy, that's where they get their information. There is an equivalent place in Trona. The TIS shop, I believe, is the name of it. And you could do bulletin board postings of these fact sheets or simplified versions of them. And you could also on there point them to certain, for the folks that are internet savvy, and there's more, actually a lot of them are, point them to the website or some of the other social media. So that's an additional way of engaging folks that we haven't done before. And also, we believe you should set up and solicit and maintain and do all your push-outs of information to an email list. That's a very common one that we haven't done, that we believe will take us a long way. The third big recommendation out of the big four for communications was employer assign a communications and engagement director or lead to be responsible and to be accountable for all this. We've seen the unintended effect of the selection of words today on a slide. And there needs to be some overarching execution for all of this strategy. And we believe we applauded the fact that Carol had taken this on, proposed it to you last week, and assigned for 6 months the $60,000 budget towards getting this going, and we believe that's a start. There were some estimates, though, that could, is 120 per year going to be adequate to do this all, and that's why the concerns came up next. So these summary recommendations were presented, and I'll read this part of it. The full scope of the expanded recommendation may likely be limited by available staff and funding as well as access to volunteers. Fiscal concern for stakeholders must be taken into consideration. The recommended prioritization of fact sheets, and we gave you a 1, 2, 3 priority, is provided to support the public understanding and engagement during the GSP implementation process. And I believe Director Vallejo asked me last time as to what the prioritization was based on. And it's based on, first, what the importance is and and that's why the first priority ones are the underpinning foundations for the GSP and the logic on how you reached that GSP. So that's the underpinnings of it. That'd be priority one. We're in the implementation phase now. Also, priority one is the first priority implementation projects and management actions. And then they go down from secondary and tertiary within that. So that's the way we recommend you assign priority in looking at staff resources and costs. And then the second thing, obviously, the social media outreach has got to be managed and controlled so it doesn't descend into a snake pit and useless or counterproductive. We believe with a three-step approach that I've talked about, it can be done, and we recommend that. And as I said, we've deferred from that list what we would put together as the recommended changes itself to the formal C&E plan to our next meeting. So that's my report. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Janus. Any questions from the board? Well, thank you, and PAC members for putting this together. I think this is some really good information, and we'll work on making it happen. Okay, with that, that takes us to number 16. That is the date of our next meeting, which will be August 10th.
Public.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, Judy. I didn't see you there.
There we go. I think in your board package you received my one-page recommendations of what to do. I objected. I didn't object to most of the main ideas, but I objected to the way it was presented and the detail that has been presented to you. This is a very ambitious proposal that has been presented to you by the rest of the PAC. Everything that is done has a dollar sign associated with it. So here we are, we have taken replenishment funds to pay back the water district. We've taken replenishment funds to put in the you don't call it a general fund, the pumping fee fund to pay back the county. Where's the money going to come from to do all this? I think you have in your package my proposal, and it's to start small and take it one at a time, basically. Carol has heard us. She heard us talking about it by listening to the PAC meeting, not only last time, but the time before, and has taken it upon herself to start the process of doing a more detailed plan of what you're going to do in projects, what it's going to cost, and what the schedule is. That's one of the things that we have. I would recommend that the next thing you do is to overhaul your web page, because it does need to be expanded and improved. I am very, very concerned about social media. I think a snake pit is a good term. I'll give you an example. Monday was the Water District Board meeting, which I attended. Of course, Stan was there. There was a member of the public who got up. He was all excited, and he spoke about the item that you had on your agenda today about the wells, and that the GA was going to take away the ability for the water district to drill its own well without GA permission. It was mentioned that no, that wasn't the case, that that public water was, please turn that off, I'm not done. That water district was exempted. He went home and got on Facebook and put on Facebook that in fact the GA was going to curtail the water district's ability to pump, to drill its own well and be able to pump. So I hope you take all this that David has said and look it over without voting on it and decide what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and what the time frame is. Because you don't have the money to do it all at once if you wanted to. You don't have the staff to do it all at once if you want to. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public speakers on this?
So I'm sure as you, Regina Troglin, sorry. So I'm sure as you guys can tell by my age, I've brought it up before, I'm a millennial. I like social media. It's where I get most of my information. I don't get it through Google by looking at the news feeds there. I primarily get it through news posts on Facebook or Instagram or actual video format on YouTube. Same with my 10-year-old daughter. So the other day, I have some numbers for you guys, just for context, because I did not use them because I didn't have them at the time. Currently, I run 2 Facebook groups. The one for just Trona has 1,200 members. The other one, which has to do with some very angry residents with that replenishment fee, has 824 members. On, I believe it was Friday of last week when I started getting the packets from April, I posted the information about this meeting on both of those pages. One of them has 468 individuals engaged with it on one of the pages and 309 within the Trona page, which is about 777 individuals within these communities, within this region, interacting online with this information. That's a pretty good turnout for individuals interacting with the information. There is, of course, overlap between both pages. They do share similarities with individuals. But even if you split that in half, that's 388 individuals that can be interacted with on a very real level. And I like stats. That's part of the reason I'm bringing it to you. There, of course, is issues with engagement and the rabbit holes and, the things that can be on there. I've been running these pages, the Trona newsletter page I've ran for 2 years. We have enough safeguards on there where things get stuck in filters. I can see them before they ever get posted and the rabbit hole is evaded. And as an administrator on there, I generally do not post my own opinion because it wouldn't be appropriate on some topics. But being able to engage with individuals on social media is extremely helpful, especially for younger ones, like my daughter, where we might frown on it as adults. I know this thing's about to start going off. But as adults, we all frown upon it. I think Gary V made a beautiful comment over on Facebook yesterday, that this is the way that younger generations communicate. As older individuals, even as an older millennial, I frown upon my 10-year-old using it, but that's how they engage. And we need to keep that in mind, that if we want these younger ones to stay engaged with these issues and to actually get involved, we have to reach them somehow. And this is how they communicate. So we really don't have a choice anymore. So I'd love for you guys to keep that in mind going forward. Thank you.
Any other members of the public that would like to speak on this? Okay, seeing none. That takes us to item 16, which is the date of our next meeting, August 10th, 2022. And with that, we are adjourned.